You're watching Northern Crimes.
Over the last few months, we've explored numerous cold cases from Oregon. These are real-life stories, haunting, sad, mysterious, and disturbing. For the families and friends left behind, it's a never-ending cycle of pain, grief, and unresolved emotions. And for law enforcement, it means countless years of frustration, a lack of evidence, and a meandering path of dead-end leads. At times, a ray of light might emerge, a cold case is solved, but for every family that finds resolution, 10 more are left searching for answers. The cases continue to pile up. This is part 2 of 5 unsolved cold cases from Oregon, and this is Northern Crimes. On the morning of June 4th, 2010, 7-year-old Kyron Horman proudly arrived at Skyline Elementary School in Portland, Oregon to showcase a science project. By all accounts, it was a day of excitement for the second grader. But as the hours passed, something went terribly wrong. Kyron never made it to his first class, and by the afternoon, he didn't return home. The disappearance of Kyron Horman sparked the largest manhunt in Oregon's history, a mystery that continues to haunt his family, the community, and investigators more than a decade later. Kyron Horman was a curious and bright child with a love for science and nature. Born on September 9th, 2002 in Portland, Oregon, Kyron was adored by his parents, Desiree Young and Kane Horman. Despite his parents' divorce, Kyron's family was filled with love and care. At the time of his disappearance, Kyron lived with his father, Kane, and his stepmother, Terry Horman, along with his half-sister, Kiara. His biological mother, Desiree, remained actively involved in his life. Kyron had a particular interest in forensic science, and he was known to wear a CSI t-shirt, which he was proudly sporting on the day he disappeared. On the morning of June 4th, 2010, Kyron was dropped off at Skyline Elementary by his stepmother, Terry Horman. The school was hosting a science fair, and Kyron was excited to present his project on tree frogs. Terry took photos of Kyron with his project, which she later posted on Facebook. According to Terry, she saw Kyron walking toward his classroom at 8:45 a.m., but he was never seen in his class that day. At 3:30 p.m., when Kyron's father and stepmother went to meet him at the bus stop, Kyron was nowhere to be found. After calling the school, they learned that Kyron had been marked absent all day, and within hours, a massive search began. The search for Kyron quickly became the largest missing person search in Oregon's history, involving over 1,300 searchers from multiple states. Law enforcement scoured the area surrounding the school and Sauvie Island, where they believed Kyron could be. But despite the vast search efforts, no trace of him was ever found. Investigators soon turned their attention to Terry Horman, the last known person to see Kyron. In the days following his disappearance, Terry failed 2 polygraph tests regarding the events of June 4th. A landscaper also came forward, claiming that months before Kyron's disappearance, Terry had attempted to hire him to kill her husband, Kane Horman. This bombshell led Kane to file for divorce and obtain a restraining order, but no criminal charges were ever filed against Terry. 14 years later, Kyron's disappearance remains unsolved, and no one has been charged in connection with the case. The investigation remains open and active, with law enforcement still seeking any new leads. Despite the suspicions surrounding Terry Horman, no concrete evidence has been found linking her to Kyron's disappearance. Kyron's mother, Desiree Young, continues to push for answers, and she even filed a civil suit against Terry, accusing her of kidnapping Kyron. Though the lawsuit was later dropped, Desiree has never given up hope that one day she'll find out what happened to her son. The pain of Kyron's loss is a constant for his family, with Desiree describing the feeling as having a, quote, hole in your soul. Yet the question remains, what happened to Kyron Horman? On the evening of November 19th, 2011, 23-year-old David Grubbs was walking home from work in Ashland, Oregon, just as he had many times before. But that evening, tragedy struck. David was brutally attacked on the town's bike path, suffering a fatal wound from a sharp-edged weapon. Over a decade later, his murder remains unsolved, leaving his family and the entire community devastated. David Grubbs was well known and loved by his community. Friends described him as kind, gentle, and full of life, a person who went out of his way to make others feel welcome. David was passionate about music, a fan of video games, and was known for his friendly demeanor. He worked at a local grocery store, Shop and Cart, where coworkers and customers appreciated his positive attitude. David had no known enemies, making his senseless death all the more shocking. On the night of the crime, David left work and began his usual walk home along the well-traveled Ashland bike path. At approximately 5:30 p.m., his body was discovered by a passerby. Initially, it was believed David had been the victim of a gunshot, but further examination revealed that he'd essentially been decapitated, a savage attack with a bladed weapon. Despite a thorough investigation, no murder weapon was found, and no witnesses came forward with key information. The Ashland Police Department immediately launched a large-scale investigation, following up on hundreds of tips, interviewing David's friends, family, and coworkers. Given the unusual nature of the attack, police investigated a range of possible motives, including whether the murder could have been random or connected to David's interests, such as online gaming. Unfortunately, these leads went cold. One person of interest emerged in the case, Christian De Laurentiis, who is currently serving a life sentence for a different crime. However, no direct evidence has linked him to David's murder. The FBI has also assisted with the case, but despite these efforts, no one has been charged, and the murder remains unsolved. More than a decade later, David Grubbs' murder continues to haunt Ashland. The Ashland Police Department remains committed to solving the case, with new detectives assigned to investigate recent leads. A reward of over $21,000 is still being offered for information that leads to an arrest. David's family and community, they deserve answers, and anyone with information is urged to come forward. Until then, the case remains a heartbreaking mystery, and David's memory lives on in the hearts of those who knew him. Zachary "Zach" Porter was a 25-year-old single father, beloved by his family and friends. On July 23, 2013, he left his home in McMinnville, Oregon, to sell his motorcycle to a buyer he'd connected with on Craigslist. It was supposed to be a simple transaction in Coos County, but Zachary never returned home. What happened after he sold the bike remains a heartbreaking mystery, leaving his loved ones searching for answers over a decade later. Zach Porter was known as a responsible and caring father to his young son. He was also the primary caregiver for his disabled mother and grandmother, displaying a maturity and sense of responsibility far beyond his years. Zach's close-knit family described him as a loving, humorous, and deeply dedicated person whose absence has left a void in their lives. He had dreams of starting a business in Los Angeles and was working towards securing a future for his family. On July 23, 2013, Zach left home to meet with a buyer in Coos County, Oregon, to sell his motorcycle. After arriving safely, Zach sent a text message to his father confirming that the sale had gone through. However, later messages sent from Zach's phone raised concern. They contained unusual punctuation that Zach never used, leading his family to believe someone else may have sent them. That evening, Zach didn't call to say goodnight to his son, something he never failed to do when away from home. Zach had told his family the buyer would drive him home, but the buyer later told authorities that Zach had arranged for a friend to pick him up at the Myrtlewood factory in Coos County. That friend has never been identified. The trail of Zach's whereabouts goes cold after he left the motorcycle sale. No one has seen or heard from him since. Zach's disappearance led to an extensive investigation. Authorities confirmed that he completed the sale of the motorcycle, but beyond that, the details became murky. The buyer of the motorcycle was named as a person of interest, though he denied offering Zach a ride home and again claimed someone else had arranged to pick Zach up. Investigators tracked Zach's phone, but there were no definitive answers. Despite search efforts along highways and in the area around Myrtlewood Factory, no trace of Zach was ever found. Zach's family has always suspected foul play. They believe Zach would never willingly abandon his son, whom he adored. His parents, Myron and Rebecca, have tirelessly advocated for their son, hoping to bring him home. Rebecca has said she would be grateful for any part of Zach, even just a tooth, to have something to hold on to or bury. Over a decade later, Zach Porter's disappearance remains unsolved. Listed among Oregon's missing Indigenous persons, his case was included in a 2021 U.S. Attorney's Office report on missing and murdered Indigenous individuals. Despite ongoing investigations, no suspects have been charged. On November 8, 2019, Graciela Garcia, a 49-year-old hairstylist and beloved mother of four, vanished from her home in Hermiston, Oregon. Her sudden disappearance left her family and community baffled. What happened to Graciela that night remains a mystery, but her loved ones continue to hope for answers. Born in Mexico on October 6, 1970, Graciela immigrated to the U.S. as a young girl and settled in Hermiston, Oregon. She was a dedicated mother, wife, and business owner. Graciela operated Carai's beauty salon from her home, where she was a well-loved hairstylist. Known for her outgoing personality, she was also an avid gardener and loved to travel, often attending hair shows for her profession. Graciela was close to her family, sharing custody of her 14-year-old son with her ex-husband and staying in constant contact with her grown daughters. On the evening of November 8, 2019, Graciela had plans to bring dinner to her 14-year-old son who was staying at his father's house. However, it was Graciela's husband who showed up with the food, telling her son that Graciela had already gone to bed. That night, Graciela's son received text messages and missed phone calls from her phone, but attempts to call her back went unanswered, raising immediate concern among her family members. The next morning, Graciela's husband told her daughter that he didn't know where she was and that she wasn't home. By November 11th, after no contact from Graciela, Her family filed a missing person report. Authorities quickly deemed her disappearance suspicious. Graciella's phone, passport, and ID were all missing, and her phone last pinged near Washington Bridge before being turned off. Hermiston police launched an investigation, receiving assistance from the Oregon State Police and the FBI. Investigators searched locations frequented by Graciella, including her home, and questioned her husband. According to police, Graciella's husband was cooperative, consenting to property searches and providing DNA samples. Despite this, no solid leads were uncovered and no persons of interest were named. Graciella's family remained active in searching for her, raising awareness through social media and fundraisers. However, months after her disappearance, investigators still lacked concrete evidence. Suspicion lingered around Graciella's husband, but no charges were filed. The community and Graciella's family are still desperate for any new information that could lead to her whereabouts. As of today, Graciella's case remains unsolved. Her family holds out hope that she still will be found, yet the lack of answers has taken its toll. Graciella's daughter, Gabby, has opened an Etsy shop to raise funds for a private investigator and legal fees, hoping to reignite attention on her mother's case. The Hermiston police continue to follow any new leads, but the mystery of Graciella's disappearance endures. In late June 2020, 45-year-old Fauna Fry set out on a road trip to Grants Pass, Oregon, to distribute her late brother's belongings. However, Fauna never returned, and what was supposed to be a short journey became one of Oregon's most puzzling missing persons cases. To this day, no one knows what happened to her. Fauna Fry was a 45-year-old woman from Dexter, Oregon, known for her love of nature, hiking, and her family. She had blonde hair, blue eyes, stood about 5 feet 6 inches tall, and weighed between 135 and 150 pounds. Fauna had faced deep personal loss, her mother in 2004, her sister in 2006, and just days before she went missing, her older brother Dallas had passed away. Fauna, who found her brother's body, was devastated and grieving. At the time of her disappearance, she was running a family business with her father and brother, building and selling homes. She was described as a strong and caring person, and her family and friends were her priority. On June 27, 2020, Fauna left her home in Dexter, driving her dark blue 2000 Jeep Grand Cherokee to visit friends of her late brother in Grants Pass. She was carrying around $25,000 worth of silver coins, part of her plan to distribute Dallas's belongings. She visited one friend, leaving a portion of the coins, then checked into a Super 8 motel. The next day, June 28th, Fauna made several purchases at local stores, including camping supplies and clothing. She returned to the motel that night, but the following morning, June 29th, she left the motel between 8:30 a.m. and 9 a.m. and never arrived at the Wiosku Inn where she had a reservation. 3 months later, her Jeep was found on a remote road near Gallus, Oregon, but Fauna was nowhere to be found. Some personal items were still inside the vehicle, but the silver coins in her purse, they were missing. Fauna's father, John Fry, reported her missing on July 5, 2020. Despite extensive search efforts by law enforcement and search and rescue teams, no trace of Fauna was found until her Jeep was discovered. Investigators found no immediate signs of foul play at the scene. In a bizarre turn, a saddlebag with Fauna's name stamped on it was discovered west of Grants Pass on Fish Hatchery Road, an area linked to suspicious activity. Fauna's father believes this could be a critical clue. Additionally, a box of unused hair dye was found in her Jeep, raising questions about whether she'd planned to change her appearance. It was later found out that Fauna had also picked up a hitchhiker during her trip. This was an unusual action for her, though authorities have since ruled the hitchhiker out as a suspect. Fauna's phone and laptop were left at home, as she'd been using a burner phone on the trip, making digital tracking difficult. Fauna's case remains open and under investigation by the Josephine County Sheriff's Office and the Oregon State Police. Despite extensive efforts, no significant leads have emerged. Fauna's father has offered a $100,000 reward for information leading to her whereabouts, and the discovery of the saddlebag has sparked hope for new clues. Oregon's unsolved cold cases contain mysteries that leave us with more questions than answers. From the haunting disappearance of young Chiron Horman to the bizarre circumstances surrounding Fauna Frey's final days, these cases represent lives cut short, families left in limbo, and communities forever changed. The investigations may grow colder with time, but the search for truth never fades. Will the next breakthrough come tomorrow, or will these cases remain unsolved, buried in the shadows of Oregon's beautiful yet unforgiving landscape? Oregon is one of the most beautiful states in the country. There's striking mountains, crystal clear rivers, and wilderness that spans hundreds of miles. The cities are vibrant, the towns quaint, and the people are diverse, often friendly, and willing to help their neighbors. But like any other state in the U.S., dark undercurrents exist. In fact, Oregon has been home to some of the most disturbing crimes of the last century. Today, we'll look at 5 of the stories that have cast a shadow on this great state, leaving families, law enforcement, and the general public with unsettling questions. Welcome to Northern Crimes. Gresham, Oregon, January 17th, 1994. A customer entered the Leathers Oil Company gas station early that morning, expecting nothing out of the ordinary. Instead, they stumbled onto a crime scene that would leave the community in shock. 3 employees, Virginia K. Endicott, Rosalie Faye Gertz, and Mary Beth Carey, lay motionless in the storage garage, each one shot execution style. Law enforcement arrived quickly, but the killer had already vanished, leaving behind a mystery that endures to this day. Who would commit such a brutal crime, and why? Leathers Oil Company was a staple in Gresham, providing fuel and convenience to locals. The 3 women working that morning were well known in the community. Rosalie Faye Gertz, 51, was a dedicated worker and a beloved mother-in-law to Mary Beth Carey, who was only 25 years old. Virginia K. Endicott was also a familiar face, part of the station's close-knit staff. Among those who once worked there was Tyrone Thies, a young employee who'd been fired months earlier. Described as quiet but reliable, Thies had one mark on his record, an incident where he stole $30 from the register. He later returned the money and apologized, but the damage was done. Shortly after, he left the job and disappeared from the public eye. The initial investigation pointed to robbery. The station's safe and cash register had been emptied, with $9,000 missing. However, it wasn't just the money that shocked investigators. It was the cold, methodical way the murders had been carried out. The 3 women had been forced into the back storage garage, ordered to lay face down, and shot in the back of the head. Detectives followed every lead, but for weeks the case remained unsolved. Then, on February 10th, 1994, a break came when law enforcement received a tip that pointed to a familiar name. Tyrone Thies. When officers searched his Southeast Portland apartment, they uncovered evidence linking him to the crime. An arrest warrant was issued on February 16th, but by then, Thies had vanished. As the investigation expanded, authorities turned their attention to Thies' known associates. Two individuals emerged as key players: his cousin, Lawrence Scherf, and a friend, Lori Stevens. Under police questioning, they admitted they'd driven Thies to the gas station that morning. They claimed they had no idea he intended to rob it, and they were horrified when he returned to the car carrying a bag of stolen cash. Both Scherf and Stevens were arrested and charged with felony murder for their roles as accomplices. They were sentenced to 10 years in prison, but their cooperation came with an agreement. They would testify against Thies if he was ever captured. Despite being placed on the FBI's most wanted list, Thies managed to evade capture. Law enforcement suspected he fled to Idaho and adopted a new identity, possibly using the alias Tyrone Walter Crozier. His distinguished tattoo of a Black Panther remained one of the only concrete identifiers available to the public. The Leathers Oil Company murders received widespread media attention, including features on Unsolved Mysteries and America's Most Wanted. Yet, despite multiple reported sightings and years of pursuit, Thies remains at large. For the families of Virginia K. Endicott, Rosalie Faye Gertz, and Mary Beth Carey, the pain of their loss remains, compounded by the absence of justice. Decades have passed, but the case is still open, and law enforcement believes Thies may still be alive under an assumed identity. Will his trail ever be rediscovered, or has he disappeared forever into the cracks of society? Salem, Oregon, 1984. The disappearance of two young women within months of each other sent shockwaves through this otherwise peaceful community. Both cases ended tragically, their bodies found miles apart, each bearing signs of horrifying violence. These crimes, linked by their brutality, led investigators to William Scott Smith, a man whose actions would forever scar Salem's history. But what drove him to commit such heinous acts? William Scott Smith was born on April 29, 1959. Raised in Oregon, his early life gave little indication of the violence he would later unleash. Dropping out of high school, Smith took on various odd jobs, including working as a fry cook. His brushes with the law began in 1978, when he was convicted of second-degree burglary in Salem. Though sentenced to a 1-year suspended term, his criminal behavior escalated in the years to come. Smith's trouble with the law wasn't limited to theft. In 1979, he faced charges for second-degree assault, but was acquitted. He later moved to Boise, Idaho, where his criminal tendencies took on a more sinister nature. In 1981, he was convicted of indecent exposure, and in 1982, his name surfaced during the investigation of a local girl's unsolved murder. Under mounting scrutiny, Smith returned to Oregon, where he felt less visible to law enforcement. The first victim, Rebecca Darling, was a 21-year-old convenience store clerk working the graveyard shift on February 19, 1984. She was last seen alive by a customer around 3:20 a.m. By 3:50 a.m., the store was deserted and Rebecca was missing. More than a month later, her body was discovered along the Little Pudding River, strangled with a rope and her hands bound behind her back. Less than 2 months later, Catherine Redmond, 18, vanished after attending a fraternity party at Willamette University. Her car was discovered abandoned with the engine running, but she was nowhere to be found. 4 days later, her body was located just miles from where Darling had been found. Catherine had been sexually assaulted and died from traumatic asphyxiation. Witnesses near the scene recalled seeing an older model Pontiac station wagon, which became a crucial clue. By April 18, 1984, investigators had identified William Smith as a person of interest. He drove a car matching the description given by witnesses, and he'd suspiciously called for a tow truck near the site of Redmond's murder. Before authorities could bring him in, Smith was arrested for making obscene phone calls, a charge that would ultimately lead to his downfall. On April 26th, Smith was arraigned on 2 counts of first-degree murder. The evidence against him was overwhelming, including physical evidence and witness testimonies linking him to both crime scenes. He waived his right to a jury trial, and the judge found him guilty on all counts. Smith was sentenced to 2 consecutive life terms in prison, with no possibility of parole for at least 40 years. While Rebecca Darling and Catherine Redmond's cases were solved, another mystery lingered. The 1982 disappearance of Sherry Irely, an 18-year-old pizza delivery girl. For decades, her family searched for answers until cold case detectives revisited Smith in prison. In 2007, Smith confessed to abducting and strangling Irely during a botched ransom attempt. Although her body was never recovered, his confession provided some closure, and he received a 3rd life sentence. Smith's involvement in additional murders, including that of Terry Monroe in 1981, further cemented his legacy as one of Oregon's most dangerous criminals. Decades after his capture, the pain endured by his victims' families remains a testament to the devastation caused by his actions. William Scott Smith's crimes revealed a calculated pattern of violence that shook Salem, Oregon to its core. What drives a person to commit such acts? And are there other cases that will forever remain buried? Newport, Oregon, December 2001. The quiet coastal town, known for its picturesque scenery and thriving fishing community, became the backdrop for a gruesome discovery. 2 young children were found weighted down in the icy waters of the Alsea River. Just days later, the nightmare deepened when divers pulled 2 suitcases from the marina containing more victims. The investigation would eventually lead to Christian Longo, a man whose actions shocked the nation and destroyed his family. Christian Longo was born on January 23, 1974, in Yspelonte Township, Michigan. Known for his charisma and charm, he married Mary Jane Baker at the age of 19. Together, they had 3 children, Zachary, Sadie, and Madison. Outwardly, the Longo family seemed like the perfect picture of domestic happiness, but behind the scenes, their lives were unraveling. Christian's ambition often outpaced his financial means. After a series of failed business ventures, he turned to fraud to maintain the facade of a comfortable life. He forged checks, stole credit cards, and racked up thousands of dollars in debt, all while keeping his mounting troubles hidden from his wife and friends. By 2001, the family had been evicted from their home in Michigan, and Christian moved them across the country to Oregon, hoping for a new start. On December 19, 2001, a fisherman on the Alsea River found the body of 4-year-old Zachary Longo floating in the water. A pillowcase filled with rocks had been tied to his leg to weigh him down. 3 days later, the body of 3-year-old Sadie was discovered under similar circumstances. The small community was horrified, but the scope of the tragedy became even clearer on December 26th when divers searching the Embarcadero Marina recovered 2 suitcases from the water. Inside were the bodies of 34-year-old Mary Jane Longo and her 2-year-old daughter, Madison. Investigators quickly realized that the entire Longo family had been murdered, with Christian Longo conspicuously absent. Witnesses reported seeing him in the days following the murders, but he'd since disappeared. Evidence at the crime scenes and the family's financial struggles pointed to Longo as the prime suspect. Police discovered that he'd drained their bank accounts and used a stolen credit card to flee the area. On December 27th, a federal warrant was issued for his arrest, and his name was added to the FBI's 10 most wanted list. Eventually, authorities tracked Christian Longo to Cancun, Mexico, where he was living under the stolen identity of Michael Finkel, a former New York Times journalist. He spent his days lounging at resorts and befriending tourists, far removed from the horrors he'd left behind. On January 13, 2002, Mexican authorities arrested him in the town of Tulum, about 80 miles south of Cancun, and extradited him to the U.S. During his trial, Longo initially claimed that Mary Jane had killed their 2 oldest children in a fit of rage, and that he, in shock, had killed her and their youngest daughter. This narrative quickly fell apart, though. The prosecution presented overwhelming evidence of premeditation, including how Longo had carefully staged the murders and disposed of the bodies. In April 2003, Christian Longo was convicted on 4 counts of aggravated murder and sentenced to death. However, due to the moratorium on executions in Oregon, he remains on death row at the Oregon State Penitentiary. Longo's case raises haunting questions about the true depths of human desperation. How can someone reach such a breaking point, and what warning signs are missed before such tragedy unfolds? Portland, Oregon, July 7th, 1975. A quiet night in the city's Old Town district was interrupted by chaos as flames erupted from the modest Pomona Hotel. The fire quickly consumed the building, trapping residents inside. By the time firefighters extinguished the blaze, 12 lives were lost. But as investigators examined the aftermath, they uncovered a chilling truth. This was no accident. It was arson. The Pomona Hotel was a far cry from its historic predecessor, Erickson's Saloon, which once boasted the, quote, longest bar in the world. By the 1970s, the building had been repurposed as a low-cost residence for Portland's most vulnerable citizens. For 80 cents a night, guests found a clean bed and a measure of stability in an area marked by economic struggle. The residents of the Pomona were diverse: laborers, retirees, and those living paycheck to paycheck. It was a place where people knew their neighbors, often sharing stories and resources. But behind its unassuming facade, the building lacked essential fire safety measures, creating a disaster waiting to happen. Around 10:35 p.m., a man later identified as Roy Jennings Beard walked into a Chevron gas station near the Pomona Hotel and purchased 50 cents worth of gasoline. Within 30 minutes, the quiet evening erupted into chaos. Flames engulfed the Pomona, spreading rapidly from the stairwell, a strategic location that cut off escape routes for those on the upper floors. Residents scrambled for safety, many climbing out windows and onto fire escapes. Witnesses described scenes of desperation, with people shouting for help as smoke poured from the building. Firefighters arrived to find an inferno, with blistering temperatures reaching 1,000 degrees on the 3rd floor. Despite their efforts, the fire claimed 8 lives that night, with 4 more victims succumbing to injuries in the following weeks. Investigators quickly determined the fire was intentionally set. A discarded gasoline canister near the building pointed to arson. Attention turned to Beard, who attempted to return the canister to the gas station for a deposit. Chevron employees recalled Beard's suspicious behavior and identified him to police. Shortly thereafter, Beard was arrested, and the evidence against him seemed clear. However, his mental health became a contentious issue. Despite multiple witnesses and forensic links, a court ruled Beard incompetent to stand trial. He was institutionalized rather than imprisoned, leaving many questions about his motivations unanswered. Today, the site of the Pomona Hotel has been rebuilt, offering affordable housing to those in need. Yet, for survivors and families of the victims, the scars remain. The fire's devastation serves as a haunting reminder of the consequences of negligence and unchecked danger. Portland, Oregon, January 4th, 1996. The city's bustling downtown came to a standstill as gunfire echoed through the iconic Coyne Center, a 35-story skyscraper that symbolized progress and modernity. What began as an ordinary day turned into a harrowing ordeal as a lone gunman stormed the building, taking hostages and injuring civilians. For hours, the city watched in fear as law enforcement worked to end the siege. But who was this man, and what drove him to such violence? The perpetrator, James Rinker, was a 24-year-old with a troubled past. Born and raised in Oregon, Rinker had a history of mental health issues and a deep-seated resentment toward authority. Those who knew him described a man struggling to find his place, often blaming others for his setbacks. In the months leading up to the attack, Rinker's erratic behavior escalated, marked by angry outbursts and an obsession with perceived injustices in his life. On the morning of January 4th, Rinker arrived at the Coyne Center armed with an AK-47 rifle, dressed in military-style camouflage and a black beret. He entered through the basement loading dock, bypassing initial security measures. Witnesses later reported that Rinker appeared calm yet determined as he moved toward his targets. The siege began when Rinker opened fire in the basement, wounding two men, Howard Barley, a delivery driver, and Alan Colkimo, a Beaverton resident. Despite being shot multiple times in the leg, Barley managed to crawl to safety, later recounting how Rinker's rifle had jammed, a malfunction that likely saved his life. As Rinker made his way to the building's lobby, he took his first hostage, a security guard. Firing sporadically, he activated the building's fire alarms, locking down the elevators and trapping occupants on various floors. His stated goal was to confront individuals he blamed for losing his courier job, but the chaos disrupted his plans. Unable to reach the upper levels, Rinker turned his attention to the Charles Schwab brokerage firm on the ground floor. Inside the office, Rinker took multiple hostages. For over 4 hours, he held them at gunpoint, issuing incoherent demands and railing against financial institutions, government corruption, and the media. Though armed and unpredictable, Rinker allowed hostages to contact their families, a gesture that seemed to reflect his internal conflict. He wasn't just a monster, one hostage later said. He was a deeply broken person. Negotiators worked tirelessly to de-escalate the situation. The turning point came when Keith Hedman, a security chief from Charles Schwab's San Francisco office, managed to get Rinker on the phone. Over the course of an hour, Hedman kept Rinker talking, providing a critical window for Portland police negotiators to establish rapport. The calm, measured communication began to wear down Rinker's resolve. Finally, at 3:45 p.m., Rinker surrendered. Emerging shirtless and handcuffed, he was escorted out by police, bringing the siege to an end. Miraculously, no one had been killed, though the emotional scars ran deep for those who had endured the ordeal. Rinker was charged with multiple counts of attempted murder, kidnapping, and weapons violations. During the trial, his defense team highlighted his history of untreated mental illness, arguing for leniency. However, the severity of his actions left little room for mercy. In 1997, Rinker was sentenced to 300 years in prison with no possibility of parole until 2266. He remains incarcerated, a reminder of the tragic consequences of untreated mental health issues and unchecked rage. Oregon's striking landscapes and vibrant communities contrast sharply with the haunting stories of these crimes. From a senseless triple homicide in Gresham to the chilling acts of Christian Longo and the devastation of the Pomona Hotel fire, these cases remind us of the shadows that can hide in even the most picturesque places. Darkness often lingers where we least expect it, waiting for someone to finally uncover the truth. Oregon's stunning natural beauty, its towering mountains, dense forests, and tranquil rivers. For a lot of people, it offers the perfect escape into the wilderness. But beneath this peaceful appearance, the remote corners of Oregon's campgrounds conceal a dark history. Within these quiet, isolated spaces lie a multitude of unsolved mysteries and very violent tragedies. Today, we'll look into a series of chilling campground murders that have left communities horrified, families devastated, and law enforcement searching for answers. How could such horrific acts occur in places meant for peace and solitude? As we unravel these stories, the contrast between Oregon's natural beauty and its sometimes hidden dangers becomes disturbingly clear. This is the true story of the Oregon Campground murders, and this is Northern Crimes. In the calm wilderness of the Siskiyou Mountains, nestled deep within Oregon's lush forests, the Cowden family embarked on what was supposed to be a peaceful Labor Day weekend in 1974. Richard Cowden, his wife Belinda, and their two young children, David and Melissa, were enjoying the tranquility of nature. But the Siskiyou Mountains would soon be shattered by a chilling and unexplained tragedy. How could an ordinary family disappear without a trace, only for their remains to be found months later in a grotesque scene that continues to baffle investigators? This is the mystery of the Cowden family murders, one of Oregon's most haunting unsolved cases. Richard Cowden was a hardworking 28-year-old logging truck driver, providing for his family in White City, Oregon. His wife, 22-year-old Belinda, was a devoted mother to their two children, 5-year-old David and 5-month-old Melissa. The family had a love for the outdoors and they enjoyed spending time in nature, so their decision to camp at Carberry Creek over the holiday weekend was a natural choice. Known as a tight-knit and loving family, their disappearance would leave a haunting void in the lives of those who knew them. On September 1st, 1974, Richard and his son David made a short trip to a local store in Copper, Oregon, to buy some milk. This would be the last confirmed sighting from anyone in the Cowden family. That evening, when the family failed to arrive for dinner at Belinda's mother's house, which was located less than a mile from their campsite, concern quickly turned to panic. Belinda's mother rushed to the campground only to find an eerie scene. The family's truck parked with the keys inside, a diaper bag and purse left out, cold water in the dishpan, and half-finished milk sitting on the table. The family's pet dog, Droopy, was later found scratching at a local store's door, but there was no sign of Richard, Belinda, David, or Melissa. The disappearance of the Cowden family sparked one of the largest search efforts in Oregon's history. Law enforcement, volunteers, and even the National Guard scoured the dense wilderness surrounding the campsite. Helicopters, bloodhounds, and search parties combed through the rugged terrain, but days turned into weeks with no sign of the family. The lack of any substantial leads frustrated investigators, and the case quickly grew cold. But this was only the beginning. 7 months later, the mystery took a grim turn when two gold prospectors stumbled upon the decomposed remains of the Cowdens 7 miles from their campsite. Richard was found tied to a tree, while Belinda, David, and Melissa were discovered in a shallow cave nearby. Belinda and David had been shot with a .22 caliber weapon, and baby Melissa's skull had been crushed. Despite exhaustive efforts, the investigation was marred by a lack of physical evidence, and no murder weapon was ever recovered. To this day, the Cowden family murders remain unsolved. While suspicion fell on a local man, Dwayne Lee Little, a convicted murderer who was in the area at the time, no concrete evidence has ever linked him to the Cowden family's deaths. Little was later convicted of another violent crime, but the murders of the Cowden family continue to elude justice. The case stands as one of Oregon's most perplexing mysteries, and the remote Siskiyou Mountains still harbor secrets that may never come to light. The memory of the Cowden family lingers, a tragic reminder of the dark unknown that can exist even in the most peaceful of places. In the quiet, mist-shrouded woods of the Oregon coast, a chilling mystery unfolded over Thanksgiving weekend in 1987. Alain Malissard, a 27-year-old French adventurer cycling across North America, was found brutally murdered at a closed campground near Nescoin Creek. His dream of exploring North America's vast landscapes was abruptly cut short in a crime that remains unsolved to this day. Who would want to kill this joyful traveler, and why? The answers have eluded investigators for decades, leaving behind only haunting questions and a cold case shrouded in mystery. Alain Malissard was a young man filled with an adventurous spirit. Born and raised in France, he had a passion for cycling from an early age. After saving his money for years, Alain embarked on the trip of a lifetime, planning to bike across Canada and the United States. By the time he reached the U.S. in late 1987, he'd already covered thousands of miles. Described by friends and family as cheerful, full of life, and kind-hearted, Alain was living his dreams until he met a tragic and untimely end in the peaceful Oregon wilderness. On Thanksgiving Day, 1987, Alain's lifeless body was discovered at Nescoin Creek Campground, a primitive Forest Service campsite closed for the season. His journey had taken him to the Oregon coast where he stopped to camp for the night, but something went horribly wrong. Alain was struck on the back of the head by an unknown object, likely taken by surprise as he settled in for the evening. There were no obvious signs of a robbery or motive, but his bicycle and personal belongings were left untouched. Despite his quiet solo travels, Alain's brutal death was anything but peaceful. The initial investigation into Alain's murder was fraught with challenges. Law enforcement agencies struggled to gather sufficient evidence, and the crime scene itself was compromised, whether by the perpetrator or law enforcement themselves remains unclear. Oregon State Police investigators expressed frustration over the lack of forensic evidence, later admitting that modern investigative tools might have made a difference. As the investigation proceeded, suspicion briefly turned toward fern harvesters in the area, but this lead went nowhere. A deeper exploration of possible suspects, including a local activist named Darrell Dino Butler, also came up empty. Decades later, filmmaker Tom Olson Jr. would attempt to piece together the fragments of this case for his documentary, Old Growth Murder. But even after 10 years of research, no new answers were found. Today, the murder of Alain Malissard remains unsolved, leaving behind a trail of grief for his family and an unresolved case for investigators. Alain's parents visited the Oregon coast years after their son's death, seeking closure at the site where his life was taken. The documentary, Old Growth Murder, continues to shine a light on the case, raising questions about investigative failures and the potential impact of modern forensic techniques. But despite this renewed interest, Alain's killer has never been found. His dream of adventure ended in tragedy, leaving a haunting mystery on the Oregon coast that still hovers over the Nescoin Creek campground. In the serene woods near the California-Oregon border, a peaceful camping trip in 2012 turned into a nightmare. Chris McCallum, a devoted father of two, was out for what seemed like a quiet weekend with his wife, Patricia. But beneath the surface, a dark plan was unfolding, one that would end in devastating tragedy. How did a family outing result in Chris's untimely death? This is the chilling story of betrayal and loss that shocked everyone who knew him. Chris McCallum was a 34-year-old husband and father from Medford, Oregon. Described by friends and family as kind and caring, Chris always put his children first. Despite the struggles in his marriage, Chris was determined to make things work for the sake of his family. A hardworking man, he dreamed of providing a stable life for his loved ones. Tragically, this loving father's life was cut short in a way that no one could have predicted. On November 20th, 2012, Chris McCallum's body was found at the base of a steep cliff in the rural Applegate Creek area. He'd been reported missing after not returning from a camping trip with his wife, Patricia. But what initially appeared to be an unfortunate accident quickly turned suspicious. As investigators pieced together the events, it became clear that Chris had not fallen by accident. He'd been the victim of a calculated plan involving his wife, Patricia McCallum, and her former stepsister, Amber. This once serene campsite had turned into the setting of a deeply troubling crime. The investigation into Chris's death uncovered a shocking conspiracy. Patricia and Amber had plotted to harm Chris during their camping trip. Amber later testified that they'd set the plan in motion, serving Chris drinks while secretly staying sober themselves. As Chris slept, Patricia shot him multiple times before rolling him over the embankment. With Amber's cooperation, the authorities gathered enough evidence to arrest Patricia, who was charged with her husband's death. The case revealed a web of deception and betrayal, leaving investigators and the local community shaken. In 2016, Patricia McCallum was found guilty and sentenced to 50 years to life in prison for her role in Chris's death. During the trial, Chris's family shared their pain, expressing their deep loss and devastation. Despite Patricia's claims of innocence, the evidence presented in court pointed to her involvement beyond a reasonable doubt. Today, Chris's family continues to mourn the loss of a beloved father, son, and friend. While justice has been served, the memory of this tragedy hangs in the air, reminding us of the fragility of life and the importance of unwavering trust in those we hold close. In the summer of 2005, two beloved educators, Stephen Hagen and Jeanette Bauman, ventured into the woods of Willamette National Forest. But what should have been a quiet retreat turned into a chilling nightmare. Their bodies were later discovered at a remote campsite, and it sparked one of Oregon's most unsettling murder investigations. Who could have brutally ended the lives of two people who dedicated their days to teaching and caring for kids? Stephen Haugen, 54, was a middle school counselor and track coach at West Ridge Middle School in Oak Ridge, Oregon. Known as Mr. H, or Coach, he was beloved by his students and colleagues alike for his kindness and dedication to education. Jeanette Bauman, 56, had recently moved to Oak Ridge to teach after years of inspiring students in Montana and Washington. Both were passionate about the outdoors and often spent their free time camping and enjoying nature. Their friends and family described them as generous, caring, and full of life, two people who had no enemies. On July 1st, 2005, campers in the Staley Creek area south of Oak Ridge made a grim discovery: the lifeless bodies of Stephen, Jeanette, and their dog Caesar. The couple had been shot multiple times at their remote campsite. Investigators found evidence that suggested they'd been shot from a distance before being shot again at close range. Their car, a 1994 GMC Jimmy, was missing its license plates, and several personal items, including a revolver and custom fishing rods, were gone. But was this a robbery gone wrong, or was there something more disturbing at play? The Lane Sheriff County's office quickly launched an investigation, but the case grew cold almost as soon as it began. Despite interviewing campers in the area and spending 10 days searching the woods, no one reported hearing any gunshots. Investigators would later find shell casings from both a high and low-powered weapon, adding to the mystery. Some authorities, including the FBI, theorized that this could have been the work of a so-called, quote, super hunter, a person who becomes territorial over certain areas of public land and eliminates intruders. There was even some theories that Alaskan serial killer Israel Keyes might be involved, but these leads went nowhere. Despite following up on other leads and testing items found at the scene for DNA, the case remains unsolved. Nearly 2 decades later, the murders of Stephen Haugen and Jeanette Bauman are still a mystery. Family members, including Stephen's daughter Kelly and Jeanette's son Dan, continue to search for closure. They regularly visit the crime scene, and they've built a memorial in honor of their loved ones. Though the investigation is stalled, new advances in DNA testing and forensic science give the families hope that the case might still be solved. With a $10,000 reward for information and several persons of interest still on the investigators' radar, the search for answers continue. But the question remains, will justice ever be served? Oregon's wilderness holds a dark secret. Beneath its serene exterior, remote campgrounds have become scenes of brutal crimes, and these unsolved cases haunt both families and investigators. Years have passed, yet the perpetrators remain at large. The wilderness guards its secrets while those left behind continue their search for answers. As time marches on, a pressing question looms. Will justice ever be served, or will the truth remain hidden in Oregon's vast expanse? These Oregon campground murders serve as a chilling reminder that even the most tranquil places can conceal unspeakable horrors. The Oregon coast is a place of distinct beauty, where rocky shores meet pristine beaches. In the summer, it's a haven, drawing Oregonians seeking refuge from the inland heat. But when autumn arrives, the coast transforms. Massive waves crash onto the shores, thick fog cloaks the landscape, and torrents of rain lash the coast. This wild and untamed place hides dark secrets, veiled within the mysterious fog. And on a cold January night in 1995, two teenage girls, Jennifer Essen and Karen Leese, left a friend's house after a night of watching movies. They decided to walk home along Highway 101, the coastal road that threads its way through this magnificent yet treacherous landscape. But they never made it. Their bodies were found weeks later, covered with brush, in a secluded wooded area near Mollala Beach. They'd been strangled. Unfortunately, this was not an isolated incident. For nearly 3 decades, the Oregon coast has been haunted by a series of eerily similar unsolved murders, leaving families and investigators searching for answers. This is Northern Crimes. In May 1992, 19-year-old Sheila Swanson and 17-year-old Melissa Sanders went camping with the Sanders family at Beverly Beach State Park. Restless and seeking change, they decided to head back to Sweet Home, Oregon. They were last seen around 11 p.m. using a payphone near the campground, trying to contact someone for a ride. When the girls didn't return, their families grew worried and contacted the authorities. Initial search efforts focused on the campground and surrounding areas, but there was no trace of Sheila or Melissa. Flyers were distributed, and pleas for information were made through local media, but the case quickly grew cold as no leads surfaced. 5 months later, on October 13, 1992, 2 sets of skeletal remains were discovered near Highway 20, east of Newport. Loggers working in the isolated, wooded area stumbled upon the remains and immediately notified the authorities. The remains were identified as Sheila and Melissa. The medical examiner couldn't determine the exact cause of death, but confirmed they had met with foul play. The discovery of their bodies brought attention to a series of unsolved mysteries along the Oregon coast. Despite the grim finding, the investigation faced significant challenges. The remote location and the time elapsed since their disappearance meant that crucial evidence had likely been lost. Detectives interviewed friends, family, and anyone who'd been in the area during the time of the girls' disappearance, but no solid suspects emerged. One point of interest was the payphone the girls had used. Investigators tried to trace the calls made from the phone, hoping to uncover who the girls had contacted or if anyone had responded to their call for a ride. Unfortunately, the records were inconclusive, providing no clear direction for the investigation. As weeks turned into months, the lack of witnesses and physical evidence caused the case to go cold. The community was left in shock and fear as the idea of a possible killer lurking in their midst began to take hold. Unfortunately, this wasn't the first time something like this had happened in the Newport area. In March 1984, 17-year-old Kelly Disney disappeared after an argument with her boyfriend, Robert Ellis. The couple had a tumultuous relationship, and on the night of March 8th, a party at their apartment led to a heated argument. Around 12:30 a.m. on March 9th, Kelly left the apartment determined to cool off by walking along Highway 20. Despite the cold, drizzly night, Kelly was seen by multiple witnesses. Ellis, concerned for her safety, found her standing on Highway 20 but couldn't persuade her to get back into his car. He left, and 2 men later offered her a ride, which she refused. A sheriff's deputy also found Kelly near Southeast Moore Drive, but she declined help, saying she was heading to a friend's house. This was the last confirmed sighting of Kelly Disney. In the days following her disappearance, Kelly's family and friends organized frantic searches. The authorities, initially treating her as a runaway, conducted their own investigations but found no trace of her. Unfortunately, the case quickly became mired in confusion and miscommunication between the Newport Police Department and the Lincoln County Sheriff's Office. 10 years later, on July 25, 1994, a man walked into the Newport Police Department carrying a skull he'd found near the Big Creek Reservoir. The skull was wrapped in carpet, and dental records confirmed it belonged to Kelly Disney. The discovery reignited the investigation, bringing both hope and despair to Kelly's family. While they finally had confirmation of her death, the circumstances remained a mystery. Investigators focused on Robert Ellis, Kelly's boyfriend, due to their volatile relationship. Despite extensive questioning and scrutiny, no conclusive evidence linked Ellis to the crime. Additionally, the unusual circumstances of the skull's discovery, placed in a location known for parties a decade after her disappearance, added to the perplexity. Witnesses who'd been in the area shortly before the skull was found denied seeing it, suggesting it had been placed there deliberately. The renewed investigation also explored other potential suspects and scenarios. The forensic examination of the skull revealed head injuries, but the cause of death remained undetermined. Despite these efforts, the case of Kelly Disney went cold once again, leaving her family and the community in limbo. On January 27, 1995, 15-year-old Jennifer Essen and 16-year-old Cara Lease spent the evening at a friend's house in Newport, Oregon. After a night of movies and fun, they decided to walk home along Highway 101 around 1 a.m. instead of calling Jennifer's older brother for a ride. The following morning, their families reported them missing, and a frantic search began. Despite the efforts of volunteers and police, no immediate clues were found. Weeks later, on February 13, 1995, loggers working near Moolach Beach discovered their bodies covered with brush. Both girls had been strangled. The community was devastated. The brutal murders of two young girls shocked everyone. Vigils were held, and the families pleaded for information. Detectives interviewed friends, family, and anyone who'd seen the girls that night. Crime scene photos revealed one of the first clues, a girl's shoe found near the bodies. The investigators considered the possibility of a serial killer, given the similarities to the other unsolved cases in the area. The manner of their deaths and the locations where their bodies were found resembled the 1992 murders of Sheila Swanson and Melissa Sanders. However, despite their efforts, no solid leads or suspects emerged. Bobby Jack Fowler, a drifter with a history of violent crimes, emerged as a potential suspect in the Oregon Coast murders. Fowler's criminal record spanned several states and included numerous violent offenses, including assault. In 1995, Fowler was arrested in Newport after a woman fell from a balcony, escaping his violent assault. He was sentenced to 16 years in prison. Fowler was later linked to several murders in Canada through DNA evidence, particularly in British Columbia, where he was connected to the deaths of young women along the Highway of Tears. His transient lifestyle and criminal history made him a compelling suspect for the Oregon Coast murders. However, despite the initial suspicion and investigation, no conclusive evidence was found to link Fowler to any of the murdered women in the area. John Arthur Aykroyd, a state highway worker, was another significant suspect, particularly in the cases of Sheila Swanson and Melissa Sanders. Aykroyd had a dark and violent history, including the 1978 murder of Kay Turner near Camp Sherman, Oregon. Aykroyd was also the prime suspect in the disappearance of his stepdaughter, Rashonda Pickle, whose body was never found. Aykroyd's connection to Highway 20, where Sheila Swanson and Melissa Sanders were last seen and later found, was particularly troubling. He lived and worked along this route, and his familiarity with the area gave him ample opportunity to commit such crimes. Witnesses reported seeing Aykroyd in a suspicious state shortly after the girls disappeared, adding to the circumstantial evidence against him. Despite these suspicions, Aykroyd was never charged with the murders before his death in prison in 2016. Robert Ellis, Kelly Disney's boyfriend at the time of her disappearance, was initially considered a suspect due to their tumultuous relationship and the argument they had the night she vanished. Ellis was one of the last people to see Kelly alive, and his refusal to cooperate with investigators raised suspicion. However, despite extensive questioning and scrutiny, no conclusive evidence ever linked Ellis to Kelly's murder. His behavior and the circumstances of their relationship made him a person of interest, but he was never formally charged. The possibility of a local perpetrator or a transient killer remains a theory. The remote locations where the bodies were found suggest someone with knowledge of the area could be involved. The lack of witnesses and physical evidence has made it challenging to identify a clear suspect. Over the years, various tips and leads have been investigated, but none have led to a definitive conclusion. Some speculate that the murders could be the work of multiple individuals rather than a single serial killer. The similarities in the cases, young girls walking alone or in pairs, disappearing along coastal highways, and their bodies being found in secluded, wooded areas, point to a possible connection. However, without concrete evidence, these remain theories. In the mid-2000s, the Newport Police Department re-examined these unsolved cases, spurred by advancements in DNA technology and new investigative techniques. Detective Ron Benson and Linda Snow, driven by a desire to bring closure to the families, took a fresh look at the evidence. The passage of time and lack of concrete evidence posed significant challenges, but their determination fueled the renewed investigation. Despite receiving over 300 tips, the investigation struggled to gain traction. Each tip was meticulously examined, but none provided the definitive breakthrough needed to solve the cases. Public appeals and media coverage played a crucial role in generating new leads. Angela Dodds, Kelly Disney's sister, spearheaded a poster and sign campaign in Lincoln County to keep her sister's memory alive and draw attention to the case. Her efforts, along with those of other families, brought renewed focus and community support. In 2009, Lincoln County District Attorney Rob Bovitt reactivated the Major Crimes Team to re-examine the unsolved homicides. New detectives, equipped with advanced DNA technology and national criminal databases, began reviewing evidence and re-interviewing witnesses. Bovitt emphasized the importance of modern forensic methods and the potential for DNA evidence to uncover new leads. The collaboration between detectives like Ron Benson and Linda Snow and the unwavering determination of the victims' families underscores the ongoing pursuit of justice for these unsolved murders. While the cases of Sheila Swanson, Melissa Sanders, Kelly Disney, Jennifer Essen, and Kara Lees remain unresolved, the continued investigation and public involvement provide hope. The memory of these young lives, lost too soon, serves as a reminder of the importance of persistence and community support in seeking justice. The dark secrets of the Oregon coast may one day be brought to light, offering closure to the grieving families and the community. Oregon is a state known for its landscapes, dense forests, cascading rivers, and scenic coastlines. It's a place where nature is bountiful, offering freedom and adventure to those who seek it. But beneath this idyllic surface lies a much darker side. Like many places, Oregon harbors its share of disturbing secrets and unsolved mysteries, cases that haunt communities and leave families desperate for answers. In the shadows of these vast forests and Cascadian mountains, sinister crimes have occurred that remain unsolved, and victims have disappeared without a trace. This is the true story of 5 unsolved cold cases from Oregon, and this is Northern Crimes. In the late spring of 1969, a University of Oregon student named Janet Lynn Shanahan disappeared after attending her younger brother's birthday party. Just 2 days later, her lifeless body was discovered in the trunk of her car. The case sent shockwaves through the Eugene community and has haunted investigators for over 5 decades. Who could have committed such a horrific crime? Despite renewed efforts, the mystery remains unsolved. Janet Lynn Shanahan was a 22-year-old student with a bright future ahead of her. An honor student at the University of Oregon, she was studying to become a teacher and was known for her kind and gregarious nature. Janet had recently celebrated her 10-month anniversary with her husband, Christopher, and was a beloved member of her family. She graduated from Willamette High School and had maintained close ties to her community. Everyone who knew her described her as a shining light, full of life and promise. On April 21st, 1969, Janet attended her 15-year-old brother's birthday party at her family's home on Rutledge Street in West Eugene. After the celebration, Janet was last seen leaving with her sister to run a few errands, picking up food and a magazine for her husband, but she never made it back to their apartment. When her husband, Christopher Shanahan, realized she hadn't returned, he reported her missing the next day. On April 23rd, just 2 days after she vanished, Christopher and Janet's sister went searching for her car. Within minutes, they found the 1951 Plymouth sedan parked in a ditch on Cross Street, an industrial area in West Eugene. Inside the trunk, they made the grim discovery: Janet had been strangled to death. The investigation into Janet's murder has spanned more than half a century, with 4 generations of investigators working tirelessly to find the killer. From the beginning, the case presented challenges. Key evidence, such as DNA, it wasn't collected or preserved due to the limitations of forensic technology at the time. Despite this, police re-interviewed witnesses and combed through old leads, and the cold case team believes that Janet's killer was someone who knew her. Additionally, investigators followed up on sightings of Janet at the Linwood Cafe, located off Highway 99, but those leads ultimately went cold. Without hard evidence or a clear suspect, the case grew increasingly difficult to solve. The cold case team hopes that someone, perhaps a friend or acquaintance of the killer, might come forward after all these years. Today, more than 50 years after her death, Janet Shanahan's murder remains unsolved. Her family hasn't given up hope, offering a $45,000 reward for information leading to the arrest and conviction of Janet's killer. For Janet's loved ones, time is running out, and they fear that those with vital information may soon be lost to age. With no DNA evidence to rely on, investigators are appealing to anyone who may have known the killer or heard something over the years. They hope that a long-held secret might eventually come to light, offering closure to a family that has lived with grief for far too long. In the late morning of February 23, 1978, Benita Chamberlain left Sacred Heart Hospital in Eugene, Oregon, with plans to return just a few hours later to bring her premature newborn daughter home. She was excited about this long-awaited moment, but she never made it back. What should have been a day filled with joy turned into a haunting mystery. Benita vanished, leaving behind only a few scattered clues, and for over 4 decades, her family has been searching for answers. Benita was a 24-year-old mother of 3 deeply devoted to her children. Her two older daughters, aged 7 and 1.5, lived with her estranged husband, John, as the couple was in the process of getting a divorce. Benita had recently given birth to their third child, a baby girl named Michelle, who was born 5 weeks premature. Known for her strong work ethic, Benita had been employed as a maid at the Holiday Inn on Coburg Road until she went on maternity leave. Her friends and coworkers described her as kind, responsible, and caring, always willing to take on extra work. Benita's dedication as a mother and her excitement about taking her newborn home made her sudden disappearance all the more puzzling and heartbreaking. On the morning of February 23rd, Benita went to Sacred Heart Hospital to nurse her newborn and prepare to bring her home. At 10 a.m., she called a friend to share her excitement. Benita was last seen leaving the hospital with her estranged husband, John Chamberlain, around the same time. The plan was for her to return by 1:30 p.m. to take Michelle home, but she never made it back. Her mother reported her missing in the early hours of February 24th. Later, that same night, around 2:30 a.m., her purse was found in a University of Oregon parking lot just a mile from the hospital. A few hours later, her car, a blue 1966 Mercury Comet, was discovered abandoned in a parking lot of a nearby Coca-Cola bottling plant, just a block from where the purse had been located. The investigation into Benita's disappearance was clouded by troubling coincidences and scant evidence. Shortly after she was reported missing, a human thigh bone was discovered in a nearby trash bin. For a brief period, authorities considered the possibility that the bone could have belonged to Benita, but later testing determined that it was part of an unrelated case involving another missing woman, Pamela Bruno. While authorities scoured the area, including searching garbage trucks for additional clues, nothing of substance was uncovered. Benita's estranged husband, John, was with her on the day she disappeared, leading to speculation about his involvement, but no evidence ever surfaced to implicate him directly. To this day, no suspects have been officially named, and investigators have few leads to go on. More than 40 years have passed since Benita Chamberlain's disappearance, and her case remains unsolved. Her family and community continue to search for answers, clinging to hope despite the passage of time. Benita's newborn daughter, Michelle, grew up without ever knowing her mother, and her older daughters were left to grapple with the mystery of what happened to her. Though her fate remains unknown, Benita's family still believes that someone out there holds the key to solving this cold case. On the morning of June 5th, 2004, 20-year-old Domingo Ramirez left his home in Cave Junction, Oregon, for what was supposed to be a peaceful day trip to Kelly Lake, a secluded spot near the California border. With him was his beloved dog Candy, a 3-year-old pit bull. But something went terribly wrong that day. Domingo never returned home, and his disappearance has left his family and investigators with a multitude of questions. What happened to this young man on a simple outdoor excursion? Despite a promising life ahead of him, Domingo vanished without a trace. Domingo Ramirez was a bright, compassionate young man who grew up in Josephine County, Oregon. He was known for his cheerful personality and his love for the outdoors. At the time of his disappearance, Domingo's girlfriend was pregnant with their first child, a son he would never get to meet. He adored his dog, Candy, who was always by his side. Domingo's mother described him as a loving and responsible son, always devoted to his family and excited about becoming a father. His sudden disappearance left a lasting scar on those who knew him, and his family continues to search for the truth. On June 5th, 2004, Domingo set off for Kelly Lake, located in the Siskiyou Wilderness just across the California border. But this day trip quickly turned into a nightmare when he never returned home. 8 days later, on June 13th, his dog, Candy, was found near Page Mountain Snow Park, just a few miles from his intended destination. She'd been shot twice in the head, but miraculously survived. Candy's discovery raised immediate alarms, but Domingo was nowhere to be found. His 1997 Oldsmobile Bravada SUV also vanished. But then, just a few weeks later in July, the vehicle was discovered in Klamath Falls, Oregon, over 100 miles from where he'd disappeared. The man driving the vehicle, Juan Miguel Ramon Soto, was arrested, but Domingo was still missing. The investigation into Domingo's disappearance has been fraught with confusion and heartache. His beloved dog was found injured but alive, raising the chilling possibility that Domingo met with foul play. Authorities identified two persons of interest in the case, Jose Luis Villegas Cavada and Joel Brian Rico Orozco. Both men were in the Happy Camp area around the time of Ramirez's disappearance and were seen driving a white Chevrolet Monte Carlo with Oregon plates. Investigators have not yet been able to locate them for questioning. Further complicating the case, some of Domingo's personal items were found on a Native American reservation in Northern California, but no other concrete evidence has emerged. In 2006, investigators reported that they'd found evidence in a foreign country related to the case, but it led to no major breakthroughs. To this day, the disappearance of Domingo Ramirez remains unsolved. His family has never given up hope, offering a $10,000 reward for information that leads to his return. While investigators believe that Domingo was likely kidnapped and murdered, his body has never been found, and no arrests have been made in connection with the case. Domingo's disappearance is one of many cold cases in Josephine County, but his family remains determined to find the truth, hoping that one day justice will be served. On April 30th, 2007, 26-year-old Rebecca Bramall left her mother's home in Portland, Oregon. It would be the last time anyone saw her. In the days that followed, Rebecca's borrowed vehicle was found abandoned deep in the wilderness of Lane County, with a flat tire and her personal belongings scattered across the dashboard. Rebecca, however, was nowhere to be found. For almost 20 years, her family has lived with unanswered questions about what really happened to her. Did she disappear by choice? Or did a sinister event occur in the Oregon forest? Growing up in Portland, Oregon, Rebecca Bramall was a nature lover with a deep passion for gardening. Born on January 9, 1981, she grew up in a large family with 4 siblings. She was a gifted horticulturist and enjoyed outdoor activities such as mountain biking. Her artistic interests included painting and making jewelry. Friends and family remember her as creative, a kind soul who adored her nieces and nephews. But despite her love of nature and life, Rebecca had been struggling with what her family believes was undiagnosed bipolar disorder. Her mental health had deteriorated in the months leading up to her disappearance. In the weeks before her disappearance, Rebecca's behavior became increasingly erratic. She began drinking heavily, staying up late, and running up credit card debt. By April 30th, 2007, she was in a fragile state. That night, she visited her mother's house before leaving when her mother urged her to get some rest. This was the last confirmed sighting of Rebecca. In early May, her borrowed vehicle was discovered abandoned on a remote logging road between Deerhorn and Good Pasture Roads, east of Springfield, Oregon. The vehicle had a flat tire and its gas tank was empty. Inside the car, the contents of her wallet were carefully laid out on the dashboard, including a cherished cigarette case. There was no sign of Rebecca, and the vehicle sat in a tow lot for a month before the authorities were notified, delaying any potential search efforts. Investigators believe that Rebecca may have traveled into the forested area close to where her car was found. Her boyfriend speculated that she may have deliberately chosen to end her life, wandering into the wilderness to hide herself. Rebecca had no known ties to the remote area where the car was found, although she'd visited the location before with her boyfriend. Due to the month-long delay between the car's discovery and the beginning of the search, authorities missed critical time to conduct a proper investigation. Despite multiple searches, no trace of Rebecca has been found, and the case remains cold. More than 17 years after her disappearance, Rebecca's case remains unsolved. Her family believes that her untreated mental illness may have played a role in her disappearance. Others suspect she may have wandered deep into the wilderness to die. While authorities have searched the area, no remains have been recovered. Rebecca's loved ones continue to hope for answers, hoping that someday the mystery of what happened to her will finally be solved. On the night of September 4th, 2008, a fire tore through a remote cabin nestled in the mountains east of Ashland, Oregon. Inside, 46-year-old David Lewis, a beloved father of 3 and a well-known member of his tight-knit community, was found dead. But this wasn't just a tragic accident. David had been killed, shot before his cabin was deliberately set on fire. To this day, his killer remains at large, and the mystery of who took David's life haunts his family and investigators. David Lewis was a hardworking man, respected by friends, neighbors, and family in the mountain community where he lived. Born on December 23, 1961 in Wilmington, Delaware, David had spent over 20 years on the summit of Dead Indian Memorial Road in Jackson County, Oregon. A true jack of all trades, he was known for his generous spirit, love of the outdoors, and deep devotion to his 3 sons. He spent his free time fishing in the nearby lakes and fixing up his rural cabin. His friends and family remember him as a man who lived simply but with integrity. Tragically, it may have been David's knowledge of secrets in his community that cost him his life. On the night of September 3rd, or perhaps early September 4th, 2008, David was murdered inside his cabin on Dead Indian Memorial Road. His body was found after a fire consumed the home, which was later determined to be an act of arson. First responders arrived at the scene around 3:10 a.m. to find the structure completely engulfed in flames. Disturbingly, they could smell the distinct odor of a body burning. It took 8 long months for authorities to identify David's remains using DNA, as his body had been severely burned. In a strange twist, another fire was reported just miles away at a vacant vacation cabin on the same night. Investigators believe the 2 fires were connected, but despite countless interviews and leads, no arrests have been made. The investigation into David's murder has been a long and difficult process. Jackson County Sheriff's Office detectives have conducted hundreds of interviews, but the case has yielded few solid leads. The bullet that killed David was similar to the one used in a different murder in Central Point that same day, but forensic testing ruled out any direct connection. Investigators have faced frustration, as it's believed that multiple people may know what happened to David, but fear or loyalty has kept them from coming forward. 16 years have passed since David Lewis was murdered, and his case remains unsolved. A $20,000 reward is being offered for any information that leads to an arrest and conviction. David's loved ones hold on to hope, believing that someone out there knows the truth. Jackson County investigators continue to work the case, but they need someone to come forward and provide the missing piece of the puzzle. As we've looked into these 5 unsolved cold cases, each one leaves us with more questions than answers. Families are left searching, investigators chase leads, and communities are haunted by the mysteries that remain unsolved. Oregon, with all its natural beauty, it harbors dark secrets, hidden deep within its forests, its rivers, and its quiet streets. These stories are not just tales of the past, but ongoing mysteries that refuse to fade into obscurity. Will justice ever be served, or will these cases remain unsolved, forever leaving us wondering what really happened in the dark corners of the Pacific Northwest? Portland, Oregon, 1991. On a cold November evening, the steady scrape of shovels broke the silence as police officers searched the backyard of an unassuming suburban home. What they uncovered confirmed their worst fears. Fragments of bone and bloody clothing buried evidence tied to a series of unsolved crimes. The flickering beams of flashlights illuminated clues that had vexed investigators for a decade. Hidden in plain sight, the scene pointed to a dark and calculated truth. But how did it get to this point, and who was responsible? This is the true story of Alvin Bud Brown and the bones that were buried in his backyard. This is Northern Crimes. In the spring of 1981, Portland, Oregon became the backdrop for a terrifying series of disappearances and murders. 4 women had vanished or been killed within a span of 30 days, the circumstances unknown. At first, these cases appeared isolated, unconnected incidents in a bustling city. But as the weeks passed, police began to see a disturbing pattern. All the victims were women, all were last seen near southwest Portland, and all had either vanished without a trace or been murdered in a similar manner. For years, their families searched for answers. Flyers were distributed, vigils were held, and desperate pleas were made to the public. But the cases grew cold, and the lives of Kimberly Ann Stevens, Noreen Davis, Sheila Burnett, and Melina Christ faded into the archives of Portland's Unsolved Mysteries. That is, until a grim discovery in 1991 forced those cases back into the spotlight and brought a man very familiar to the authorities back into custody. Kimberly Ann Stevens was just 17 years old when her life was tragically cut short. Described by her friends as kind and ambitious, Kimberly lived in southwest Portland with her family. On the night of May 8, 1981, she was last seen walking along the Southwest Haines Road overpass over I-5, heading toward a viaduct near her boyfriend's house. Kimberly was wearing her signature black ski jacket and white tennis shoes. When she failed to arrive, her family reported her missing, setting off a frantic search. Days later, her partially clothed body was discovered in a bushy field behind the Southwood First Evangelical Church, just a mile from her home. She'd been strangled, and her death shook the quiet neighborhood, leaving her friends and family in disbelief. Melina Christ, 17, was a high school student with dreams of pursuing a career in fashion. She was last seen on May 9th, 1981, when her mother dropped her off at the Portland Community College campus for a class. Melina never returned home, and for days, her family held out hope that she might be found safe. Tragically, it would be another 2.5 years before her skull was found by a construction crew clearing a lot on Southwest Barber Boulevard. Noreen Davis, 31, was a single mother who worked tirelessly to support her 2 young sons. A waitress at the General Store restaurant in Beaverton, Noreen was known for her warm smile and tenacity. On the night of May 18, 1981, she left work around 2:30 in the morning after receiving a call from an unidentified man who claimed to need her help. Witnesses later recalled seeing Noreen's car abandoned on Southwest 93rd Avenue. Officers later found her purse with money inside the vehicle, with its ignitions left in the on position. There was no appearance of a struggle. Hours later, her body was found at the foot of an embankment just 15 feet from her car. She'd been stabbed and strangled. The brutal nature of her death left investigators searching for answers. Sheila Burnett, 57, was a beloved member of her community, known for her nurturing spirit and close ties to her family. She was reported missing by her husband on May 29, 1981, after she failed to return home. A handwritten note left for her husband suggested that Sheila accepted a ride from someone who offered to take her to a hospital after claiming her son had been in an accident. Similar to Noreen's case, there was no accident. Her disappearance would remain a mystery until a grim discovery was made a decade later. As investigators pieced together the disappearances and murders of the 4 women in 1981, they were confronted with a puzzle that offered few clues. Each case seemed tragically similar. Women abducted from the same Southwest Portland areas, their lives either ending violently or the location of their bodies unknown. But even then, no clear suspect emerged. Over time, the investigation waned, weighed down by a lack of forensic technology and mounting cold cases. By 1985, the city had moved on, the families left to grieve in silence. Yet, behind the scenes, detectives still harbored suspicions that these murders and disappearances were somehow connected. They believed that whoever was responsible had gone dormant or perhaps was still operating unnoticed. Amidst the murkiness of the 1981 cases, another crime rocked Portland. In April of that year, a 15-year-old girl was attacked while walking home near Jackson High School. A man approached her under the pretense of looking for a lost dog, but he quickly overpowered her and threatened her life. She survived the ordeal and quickly identified her attacker as a man named Alvin Bud Brown. Brown was arrested and charged with a litany of serious crimes. The trial revealed horrifying details of the assault. He was quickly convicted, receiving 2 concurrent 20-year sentences. At the time, the outcome seemed like a decisive step toward justice, but like many wily perpetrators, Brown would slip through the cracks. Oregon's sentencing guidelines at the time, known as the quote matrix system, allowed for significant reductions in prison time based on an inmate's behavior and participation in rehabilitation programs. Brown qualified for these reductions, and despite objections from prosecutors and concerns over his risk to public safety, he was released on parole in July 1985, just over 4 years after his incarceration began. This marked a turning point, not in rehabilitation, but in escalation. Brown's subsequent actions would suggest that the brief period in prison failed to address the underlying behaviors that had led to his conviction in the first place. His release allowed him to continue living quietly in Southwest Portland, a detail that would later link him to far more serious crimes. Born and raised in the Pacific Northwest, Alvin Brown, known to his friends and family as Bud, had a life marked by a string of troubling behaviors. Described by those who knew him as, quote, reserved and, quote, hard to read, he grew up in a working-class neighborhood of Portland. But by his early 20s, Brown's demeanor turned darker. He struggled with relationships, had brushes with the law, and was known to make women in his neighborhood feel uneasy. In the years following his release, Alvin sought to rebuild his life. He married a woman named Jackie, a private nurse who'd cared for his grandparents. The couple settled into a modest home in southwest Portland. However, their relationship soon revealed troubling dynamics marked by tension, lies, and unease within the household. In 1987, Alvin's brother, Michael Brown, filed for a restraining order against him. Michael cited, quote, continuous threats and past physical abuse, describing incidents that escalated to the point where he feared for his safety. This added another layer to the picture of Alvin's volatile and aggressive tendencies, which seemed to persist despite his attempts to lead a normal life. By 1991, Alvin Brown's facade of normalcy was cracking. Reports of women being followed near his neighborhood began to surface. Then, a string of violent assaults in late October and November left police scrambling for answers. This set into motion the chain of events that would lead investigators back to the unsolved murders from 1981. The sequence of events that would finally bring Alvin Brown back under police scrutiny began on a cold November night in 1991. Along a stretch of Interstate 5, an 18-year-old woman was found severely injured after being thrown from a moving vehicle. Though she survived, her injuries left her unable to speak for weeks. Then, less than a month later, another woman was pushed from a freeway overpass near Southwest 22nd Avenue. Miraculously, she survived the fall and, despite her injuries, was able to provide police with a vital clue. Her attacker was driving a white Oldsmobile. Just days after the second assault, Alvin Brown was arrested on unrelated charges of theft and robbery. Police began to connect the dots between these violent attacks and the man they already knew well. A search warrant executed at Brown's Southwest Portland home revealed a chilling array of evidence: duct tape, blood-stained fabrics, and other disturbing items. Though these discoveries pointed to violent acts, the most damning evidence was yet to come. Investigators traced some of Brown's movements back to a separate property he'd lived in during the early 1980s. There, they uncovered a set of skeletal remains, later identified as belonging to Sheila Burnett. This shocking discovery not only reopened the 1981 cold cases, but also painted a much darker picture of Alvin Brown's past. With the discovery of Sheila Burnett's remains, detectives launched an exhaustive investigation into Alvin Brown's potential connection to the other unsolved murders from 1981. The circumstantial evidence was overwhelming. At the time of the killings, Brown had been free on bail after his rape conviction, and he'd lived in the same area where all four women were last seen. His proximity to the crime scenes, coupled with his violent history, made him a prime suspect. The advancements in forensic technology by 1991 became critical to the case. Bloodstains found on fabric at Brown's home were tested, though results linking them to the victims were inconclusive. Pieces of duct tape found at his former property contained hair fibers consistent with some of the women. Police also recovered personal belongings, including items of makeup and jewelry that investigators suspected belonged to the missing women. This evidence painted a compelling narrative, but still fell short of an airtight case. Detective Mike Heffley, who'd followed the case for years, described Brown as a predator. He preys on women, and he feels a need to hurt them. This belief drove the detectives to piece together every bit of evidence they could find to connect Brown to the crimes. In December 1991, Alvin Brown faced charges of attempted murder, aggravated assault, and attempted rape for the violent attacks on the two women in late 1991. The trial, which began in the spring of 1992, captivated the Portland community. Over the course of the proceedings, prosecutors painted a picture of a calculated predator who thrived on inflicting harm. Witness testimony from the surviving victims was harrowing as they recounted the terror they endured and identified Brown as their attacker. Physical evidence, including the fingerprints found on a bed frame in Brown's home, bolstered the prosecution's case. In May 1992, a jury found him guilty on all counts, and he was sentenced to 69 years in prison. During the sentencing, the judge described Brown as, quote, a significant threat to public safety and capable of extreme cruelty. The community's reaction to Brown's trial was a mix of outrage and frustration. Many saw his early release from prison in 1985 as a critical failure of the justice system, one that may have cost the lives of innocent women. Comparisons were drawn to other notorious killers from the region, such as Dayton Leroy Rogers, who was convicted in 1989 for the brutal murders of 7 women in the Molalla Forest, and Ted Bundy, whose reign of terror across the Pacific Northwest ended with his 1978 arrest. For Portland residents, the case of Alvin Brown reinforced fears of an era where serial predators seemed all too common, and the cracks in the system that allowed such individuals to remain free loomed large. But unfortunately, true justice would never come. Despite overwhelming circumstantial evidence tying Brown to the murders of Kimberly Ann Stevens, Noreen Davis, Sheila Burnett, and Melina Christ, he was never formally charged with their deaths. Prosecutors cited a lack of definitive forensic evidence and the challenges of building a case based on decade-old crimes. Brown refused to confess, leaving the full extent of his crimes shrouded in uncertainty. The case of Alvin Bud Brown is a stark reminder of the gaps in the justice system. 4 women lost their lives in the spring of 1981. Their killer walking free for a decade before being brought to justice for other crimes. While Brown spent the rest of his life behind bars, the full extent of his actions may never be known. In 2002, Brown died of natural causes in prison, taking many of his secrets to the grave. Investigators, families, and the public were left to wonder how many more victims may have fallen prey to his monstrous instincts. For the families of Kimberly Stevens, Noreen Davis, Sheila Burnett, and Melina Christ, the pain of unanswered questions linger. The discovery of Sheila Burnett's remains in the backyard he once occupied offered some grim answers, but raised even more troubling questions. Were there more grave sites in other homes he'd lived in? Could other disappearances in Portland and beyond be tied to Alvin Brown? His silence in the face of these accusations left a trail of mysteries, unidentified, unresolved. Even decades later, the backyard of Alvin Brown's rented home stands as a silent witness to the horrors that unfolded there. And for the detectives who unearthed those bones, the case remains a chilling reminder of the evil that can hide in plain sight. For now, the ground holds its secrets, but one haunting question remains. What dark truths still lie buried, waiting to be discovered? The picturesque northwest state of Oregon is known for its breathtaking landscapes, bustling cities, and friendly people. But behind this beautiful facade lies a dark history of shocking events that have shaken its people to their core. From gruesome murders that have gone unsolved for decades to a bioterror attack that left hundreds ill, Oregon's history of crime is nothing short of disturbing. This is Northern Crimes. Diane Downs was a divorced mother of 3 and a postal worker living in Springfield, Oregon. On the night of May 19, 1983, Downs claimed that she and her children had been ambushed by a stranger on a rural road. She stated that the attacker shot her children and then shot her in the arm before fleeing the scene. Somehow, Downs was able to drive herself and her children to the hospital, but sadly, her daughter Cheryl was dead on arrival. Initially, police believed Downs' version of events, even going as far as recreating the scene. However, during the investigation, police began to uncover inconsistencies in her story. For example, the description of the alleged attacker changed over time. Additionally, Downs didn't appear to be as upset or emotional as one would expect from a mother whose children had been shot. As the investigation continued, police discovered that Downs had a complicated history, including a previous failed attempt to kill her own children. They also learned that Downs had been seeking attention and sympathy from men, and that her desire to be with a new love interest may have played a role in the attack. Eventually, police found evidence that suggested that Downs had shot her own children. Ballistics testing showed that the bullets used in the attack came from Downs' own gun. In court, Downs maintained her innocence and continued to claim that a stranger had attacked her and her children. But the evidence was too strong, and she was found guilty on all counts. The Diane Downs case is a chilling reminder of the lengths that some people will go to for attention or personal gain, and the devastating consequences that can result. The case continues to be studied and discussed by criminologists, psychologists, and true crime enthusiasts, and remains one of the most haunting and disturbing cases in Oregon's history. In the quiet town of The Dalles, Oregon, an unthinkable act of terror took place that shocked the nation. In 1984, a group of followers of Indian guru Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh carried out a bioterrorist attack that would forever change the course of history. The Rajneesh movement had a grand vision of gaining control of the local government in the Dalles, but their efforts to influence the outcome of the election failed. This resulted in a sinister plan to commit a series of bioterror attacks on the town's residents. The attack centered on the intentional contamination of salad bars in 10 local restaurants with salmonella bacteria. The goal was to make people sick and prevent them from voting in the upcoming election, ultimately giving the Rajneeshis an advantage. The attack caused over 750 people to become ill, with 45 being hospitalized. The aftermath of this attack was devastating, and the victims were left to deal with long-term effects. After the attack, the FBI and other law enforcement agencies launched an investigation and found evidence linking the attacks to the Rajneesh movement. The movement's leaders were subsequently arrested and charged with various crimes, including conspiracy to commit murder and bioterrorism. As a result, the Rajneesh movement collapsed, and its leaders were deported back to India. The consequences of this attack were far-reaching and demonstrated the danger of extremist groups using biological weapons to achieve their objectives. This event remains one of the most significant bioterror attacks in U.S. history and serves as a warning to the world. On the cold winter day of January 17th, 1989, the chilling winds of Salem, Oregon, carried with them an ominous foreboding. As the sky grew darker, Michael Franke, the head of the Oregon Department of Corrections, was engrossed in his work. He finally left the office at the DOC headquarters and headed to his car amidst a mostly deserted parking lot. The time was around 9 p.m. Suddenly, out of the shadows, an unknown assailant attacked Franke, stabbing him multiple times. Despite making it back to the office, Franke eventually succumbed to his injuries, collapsing within the walls of his office. The brutal attack left a trail of unanswered questions, shrouded in a cloud of mystery, which haunts investigators to this day. The murder of Michael Franke sent shockwaves through the Salem community and beyond. As news of the brutal attack spread, people were stunned that such a high-profile figure could be targeted in such a violent manner. In the aftermath of the murder, authorities launched what would become the longest and most expensive homicide investigation in Oregon history. Detectives interviewed witnesses, combed through surveillance footage, and gathered evidence in an attempt to solve the case. Then, in 1990, a small-time meth dealer named Frank Gable was arrested for Franke's murder. The following year, he was convicted and sentenced to life in prison without parole. But that wasn't the end of the story. Over the years, Gable vehemently maintained his innocence. At one point, another man even confessed to the crime, but authorities didn't charge him. Finally, in a stranger-than-fiction turn of events, Michael Franke's two brothers came to the defense of Gable, urging the courts to release him. And in 2019, nearly 30 years after his conviction, Frank Gable walked out of prison a free man. But this still begged the question, who murdered Michael Franke? The unsolved nature of the case has left many people frustrated and bewildered. How could such a high-profile crime go unsolved for so long? Who could have committed such a heinous act, and why? The Michael Franke murder remains one of the most puzzling and enigmatic unsolved cases in Oregon's history. On January 17, 1994, the Leathers Oil Company in Gresham, Oregon, was the site of a brutal and unsolved mass murder. Virginia K. Endicott, Rosalie Faye Gertz, and Mary Beth Carey, all employees of the gas station, were found shot to death in a storage room on the premises. The station was also robbed of approximately $9,000. At the time, the case received national attention and was branded as one of the most notorious murders in the Pacific Northwest. Tyrone Walter Thies, a former employee who had been terminated for stealing in August 1993, was charged with 3 counts of aggravated murder. However, he disappeared a few weeks after the victims' bodies were discovered. Thies' cousin, Lawrence Benjamin Scherf, and his friend, Lori Ann Stevens, were both convicted and served 10 years in prison for their role as accessories to the murders. The Leathers Oil Company murders created a ripple effect throughout the community of Gresham and remained a dark cloud over the town for many years. The fact that Thies was never brought to justice added to the pain felt by the victims' families and the wider community. The case has been profiled on national television, including Unsolved Mysteries and America's Most Wanted, in the hopes of generating leads. Law enforcement believes Thies is still alive, probably residing in the United States under a false identity. The Leathers Oil Company murders remain unresolved to this day, serving as a tragic reminder of the devastating impact that violence can have on our communities. The victims' families continue to seek closure and justice for their loved ones, and the case remains open in the hopes that someday the perpetrator will be brought to justice. On October 1st, 2015, a 26-year-old man named Christopher Harper Mercer walked into a classroom at Umpqua Community College in Roseburg, Oregon, and began shooting at students. The incident was sudden, and many students were caught off guard. Harper Mercer fired his weapon for several minutes before law enforcement arrived and evacuated the students. During that time, many students took cover under desks and hid in corners, while others tried to escape the building through windows or doors. After engaging in a firefight with law enforcement, a wounded Harper Mercer retreated into a classroom and killed himself with a single shot to the head. When the dust settled, 9 people were killed, with an additional 8 wounded. The incident sparked a national debate about gun control laws and mental health issues. It was later revealed that Harper Mercer had a history of mental illness and legally purchased all of his firearms. Many people questioned how someone with a history of mental illness could obtain a gun so easily, and whether there should be more stringent background checks in place. In the aftermath of the shooting, the Umpqua College community came together to support one another and honor the victims. Students, faculty members, and members of the city gathered for vigils and memorials to remember those who lost their lives. The Umpqua Strong Memorial Garden was later created on the campus as a permanent tribute to the victims. The Umpqua Community College shooting remains one of the deadliest mass shootings in Oregon's history. While the shooting itself only lasted a few minutes, its impact was far-reaching and long-lasting. The tragedy affected not just the families of the victims, but also the wider community of Roseburg. Oregon's beauty and charm may be what draw many people to the state, but its history of crime serves as a reminder of the darker side of human nature. While the state has seen its share of tragedy and horror, its residents continue to show resilience and determination. By coming together as a community and supporting one another in times of need, Oregonians have proven that even in the face of the darkest events, hope can always prevail. The Pacific Northwest highways are often shrouded in fog. Mist rolls in from the ocean, casting an eerie silence over these long and winding roads. And on a cold January night in 1981, the quiet town of Kaiser, Oregon, was plunged into darkness by a shocking and brutal crime. Inside a dimly lit office building, 2 young women working the night shift as cleaners were unaware their lives were about to change irrevocably. Little did they know, a man had slipped into the building with deadly intent. Within moments, he attacked. One woman wouldn't survive, but the other would live to tell a tale that would bring fear to everyone along the West Coast's busiest and most notorious highway. This is the true story of the I-5 murders, and this is Northern Crimes. Lisa Garcia, the survivor, later recounted the harrowing events of that night to the police. She and her coworker, Sherry Hall, had been casually chatting while cleaning the offices. Suddenly, an armed man appeared, his intentions far more sinister than mere robbery. After assaulting both women, he then shot them. Sherry Hall died instantly, but Lisa Garcia, defying the odds, survived. Her survival would later provide investigators with a crucial piece of the puzzle, leading them to a dark truth that had been haunting the I-5 corridor for months. The attack on Sherry Hull and Lisa Garcia, it wasn't an isolated incident. For months, a string of similar crimes had been reported along Interstate 5, stretching from Northern California all the way to Washington state. Women were being assaulted, robbed, and attacked at gas stations, convenience stores, and office buildings, all located within a short distance of the highway. Each crime shared common elements: a male suspect with an athletic build, often wearing a disguise. Sometimes he donned a fake beard, other times a bandage over his nose. He was methodical, efficient, and always seemed to vanish into the night before law enforcement could arrive. The media would dub the perpetrator the I-5 Killer and spread fear through the communities along the highway. The randomness of the attacks made everyone a potential target. Women grew afraid to work late shifts, and business owners installed extra security measures hoping to deter the killer. Despite tireless efforts from police across multiple jurisdictions to connect the dots, the I-5 Killer remained elusive. As investigators delved deeper into the series of crimes, a name repeatedly surfaced: Randall Woodfield. Though previously questioned, Woodfield's involvement in earlier crimes remained unproven. Who was this man, and why had he caught the authorities' attention? To unravel this mystery, we need to journey back to the beginning, to the small coastal town of Otter Rock, Oregon, where Woodfield's story began. Randall Woodfield was born on December 26, 1950, into an upper-middle-class family. He grew up in a picturesque setting along the Oregon coast, with two older sisters and a father who was a successful executive at Pacific Northwest Bell. From an early age, Woodfield showed athletic promise. He excelled in sports, particularly football, and quickly became a local star at Newport High School. To those around him, Woodfield seemed like he had everything going for him. However, just beneath the surface, early signs hinted that all was not well. As a teenager, Woodfield's behavior started raising red flags. He was caught exposing himself to young girls, incidents that were quietly swept under the rug to protect his promising football career. His high school coaches, keen on their star player's success, concealed these episodes. When Woodfield turned 18, his juvenile record was expunged, allowing him to leave these troubling events behind. He continued his football journey, securing spots at Treasure Valley Community College and later Portland State University. At Portland State, Woodfield thrived on the football field as a wide receiver for the Vikings. He also immersed himself in religious groups, joining the Campus Crusade for Christ and the Fellowship of Christian Athletes. To teammates and friends, Woodfield seemed a clean-cut, devoted young man. However, his off-field behavior painted a much different picture. Multiple arrests for indecent exposure revealed a pattern of deviant behavior that appeared to worsen over time. Despite his troubling behavior, Woodfield's athletic talent caught the attention of NFL scouts. In 1974, the Green Bay Packers drafted him in the 17th round. This opportunity seemed like a turning point, a chance for fame and success. However, Woodfield's time with the Packers was brief. Cut during preseason, his professional football career ended before it truly began. Disappointed and adrift, he returned to Oregon, where his life began to unravel. By the mid-1970s, Woodfield had abandoned his football dreams and turned to increasingly violent criminal behavior. In 1975, he was arrested for a series of assaults on women in Portland, threatening them with a knife. Caught in a police sting operation, Woodfield was convicted of second-degree robbery and sentenced to 10 years in prison. However, he served only 4 years before being released on parole in 1979. Following his release, Woodfield's behavior became more erratic and dangerous. The murder of Sherry Ayers in October 1980 marked the beginning of his violent spree. Ayers, a former classmate whom Woodfield had known since childhood, was found in her Portland apartment. She'd been brutally attacked and left to die. Ayers was a University of Oregon graduate and an X-ray technician, well liked by those who knew her. Woodfield was questioned about her death, but without enough evidence to link him directly to the crime, he was released. However, this would only be the start of a series of brutal crimes that would follow. As November 1980 drew to a close, Woodfield's murderous rampage intensified. His next victims were Darcy Fix, a 22-year-old woman, and her boyfriend, 24-year-old Douglas Altig. On a quiet evening in North Portland, Woodfield invaded Fix's home, catching the unsuspecting couple off guard. With cold precision, he bound both Fix and Altig before shooting them. The brutality of this double homicide sent shockwaves through the community. In a chilling twist, investigators later uncovered that Woodfield and Fix were connected through mutual acquaintances at Portland State University. This revelation added a disturbing layer to the crime, suggesting a calculated choice of victim rather than a random act of violence. However, despite this connection, law enforcement again found themselves at an impasse. The lack of concrete evidence linking Woodfield to the murders allowed him to slip through the cracks. This left him free to continue his reign of terror along the I-5 corridor. As 1980 faded into 1981, Woodfield's violence escalated. His crimes extended beyond murder to include a string of armed robberies along Interstate 5. On December 9, 1980, he robbed a gas station in Vancouver, Washington, wearing a fake beard. 4 days later, he held up an ice cream parlor in Eugene, Oregon. And on December 14, he robbed a drive-in restaurant in Albany, Oregon. He had a distinct modus operandi during these crimes, often using a disguise and brandishing a gun to intimidate his victims. In January 1981, Woodfield's rampage continued. He robbed the same Vancouver gas station for a second time and committed another robbery in Eugene. On January 12, he escalated his violence further by shooting and wounding a female clerk at a grocery store in Sutherland, Oregon. Then, on January 14, he invaded the home of two young sisters in Portland. His cruelty would leave a lasting scar on their lives. On January 18, 1981, Woodfield's actions took a deadly turn in Kaiser, Oregon. Entering an office building late at night, he encountered Sherry Hall and Lisa Garcia, two young women working the night shift as cleaners. Woodfield assaulted both women, then shot them, leaving them for dead. Sherry Hall succumbed to her injuries, but Lisa Garcia miraculously survived. Her survival would be pivotal in eventually bringing an end to the madness. But Woodfield wasn't done. Not long after the attack in Kaiser, Woodfield's path of destruction led him to Mountain Gate, California. On February 3, 1981, he entered the home of Donna Eckerd and her 14-year-old daughter, Janelle Jarvis. Both were later found in bed, each having been shot. This double murder shocked the quiet community. It underscored the escalating brutality of the I-5 killer. By February 1981, Woodfield's violent spree had captured the full attention of law enforcement across multiple states. Detectives from various jurisdictions collaborated, piecing together the puzzle that pointed to Woodfield. His erratic behavior, the connection to past victims, and the mounting eyewitness descriptions were tightening the noose. On March 5, 1981, Woodfield was brought into the Salem Police Department for interrogation. Evidence found in his Springfield apartment, including a spent .32 caliber bullet and a roll of tape similar to what had been used in the crimes, provided crucial links. Further, Lisa Garcia's identification of Woodfield in a photo lineup, along with other witness testimony, helped solidify the case. By March 16, Woodfield was indicted on multiple charges including murder, assault, and robbery. In the summer of 1981, Randall Woodfield stood trial in Salem for the murder of Sherry Hall and the attempted murder of Lisa Garcia. The trial captivated the nation, shedding light on the dark and violent path Woodfield had carved along the I-5. After just 3.5 hours of deliberation, the jury returned a guilty verdict. Randy Woodfield was sentenced to life in prison plus 90 years, ensuring he would never walk free again. Randall Woodfield's reign of terror along the I-5 corridor left a trail of devastation and sorrow. While only convicted of one murder, the evidence, including DNA testing in 2012, suggested his crimes spanned much further, involving numerous assaults, robberies, and potential homicides. Woodfield's story is a chilling reminder of the darkness that can lurk behind even the most unsuspecting facades. To this day, he remains in the Oregon State Penitentiary, serving out his life sentence. Though justice was served, the questions of why and how such violence could manifest in one individual remain unanswered. The legacy of the I-5 murders still linger in the mists of the Pacific Northwest, a stark reminder of the unpredictable nature of evil. Bend, Oregon, July 2016. A city known for its pristine landscapes, craft breweries, and outdoor adventures. 300 days of sunshine bathe the Cascade Mountains and the winding Deschutes River in golden light. Tourists and locals alike hike the trails, paddle the waters, and enjoy the vibrant downtown scene. But on a warm summer night, as the city slept, darkness descended on this idyllic community. 23-year-old Kaylee Sawyer had just attended a bachelorette party downtown. After an argument with her boyfriend, she decided to walk alone to clear her head. It was a decision that would lead to unimaginable horror. What began as a missing person case would reveal a predator hiding in plain sight, a man whose job was to protect the community, but who harbored a, quote, urge to kill. His confession would shock the nation, his crime spree would terrorize multiple states, and his actions would ultimately change the law. This is the true story of the murder of Kaylee Sawyer and the twisted man who silenced her forever. This is Northern Crimes. Nestled in the high desert of Central Oregon, Bend is a striking blend of rugged natural beauty and modern charm. The city sits at the edge of the Cascade Range, where dense pine forests give way to dramatic volcanic landscapes, and the winding Deschutes River cuts through the heart of town. Known for its 300 days of sunshine a year, Bend has transformed from a small logging town into an outdoor enthusiast's paradise. Locals here live where others vacation, hiking and mountain biking in the summer, skiing Mount Bachelor in the winter, and enjoying world-class fly fishing and kayaking year-round. But Bend is more than just its outdoor offerings. The city has cultivated a vibrant, laid-back culture that blends small-town warmth with cosmopolitan amenities. The craft beer scene defines much of Bend's modern identity, with one of the highest per capita brewery counts in the nation. Central Oregon Community College sits on the western edge of the city, its campus perched on a hill overlooking town. Students are drawn not just for the education, but for the lifestyle, the ability to hit the slopes or trails immediately after class. As night falls, Bend takes on a different character. Downtown comes alive with music and dining, while the stars shine brilliantly in the clear mountain sky. It was in this idyllic setting, this seemingly perfect blend of natural beauty and community warmth, that darkness would descend on a July night in 2016, forever changing how residents viewed their safe, picturesque hometown. In the early morning hours of July 24th, 2016, Kaylee Sawyer was enjoying a night out with friends at a bachelorette party in downtown Bend. The 23-year-old dental assistant was vivacious and full of life, the kind of person who, according to her family, brought joy to everyone around her. As the night wound down, Kaylee called her boyfriend, Cameron Rimhofer, to pick her up. The couple lived together in an apartment near Central Oregon Community College, but what should have been a routine ride home took a dark turn. During the drive, Kaylee and Cameron got into an argument. When they arrived at their apartment complex, Kaylee stayed in the car while Cameron went inside, hoping to give her space to cool down. 10 minutes later, when he returned to check on her, Kaylee was gone. Cameron tried calling and texting her multiple times.
"Hey, where are you? Please come home and talk to me at least. You're being unfair."
Are you kidding? What a joke. I'm sorry I'm not good enough for you.
Their exchange continued, growing increasingly tense. In her final text, Kaylee wrote simply,
"Goodbye. Phone off."
When Kaylee didn't return home that night, Cameron grew increasingly concerned. By the next day, with no word from Kaylee and her phone still off, he called 911.
Dispatch, how can I help you? Hello?
Hi. I'm not sure if this is quite the right number to call. Last night I got home from the bars with my girlfriend, and she got upset at me and ran off. And I chased her and wasn't able to find her, and I still haven't heard from her. Her phone's off. I called all her family, and they haven't heard from her, so I'm wondering what you recommend I do.
Kaylee's mother, Julie, also called 911, mentioning that her daughter had epilepsy and medical issues that made her disappearance even more concerning.
Dispatch, how can I help you?
Yes, I need to have an officer call me. My daughter is missing, and she is over 23, but she has epilepsy and some medical issues.
As hours turned into days with no sign of Kaylee, her family and friends launched a desperate search. They distributed missing persons flyers throughout Bend, scoured social media for clues, and pleaded for information from the public. What they didn't know was that Kaylee had already met a horrific fate at the hands of a predator no one would have expected. On July 25th, just one day after Kaylee disappeared, Isabel Ponce-Lara walked into the Redmond Police Department with disturbing information. Isabel, a New Bend police officer, told authorities that her husband, Edwin Lara, had confessed to killing a woman.
So he was working night shift that Saturday night, getting off, I think, like 2 or 2:30 in the morning, Sunday.
And what time does that have him starting work-ish?
I think that day he went in, or he was going to go in around 3 p.m., I think it was.
And when is his only security job for COCC in that area? He doesn't have any other areas that he provides security for?
Edwin Lara worked as a security guard at Central Oregon Community College, the very campus near where Kaylee and her boyfriend lived. According to Isabel, Edwin had told her that he, quote, hit a woman with his car during his previous shift, panicked, and hid the body. Before Isabel could learn more details, Edwin grabbed her 9mm handgun and fled their home, telling her that the woman's belongings were in their shed. Police immediately obtained a search warrant for the Lara residence, and what they found in the shed sent chills down their spines. A white bag containing high-heeled shoes, a purse with a black wallet, a passport, a blood-stained rock, and a clump of hair. The items belonged to Kaylee Sawyer. they also discovered something else, a school project that Edwin had created about serial killer Angel Resendez Ramirez, known as the, quote, railroad killer. Edwin had noted that Ramirez always killed with blunt force trauma. He used weapons of opportunity that were found at the scene. The investigation had suddenly transformed from a missing person case to a homicide. Rather than facing up to his crime, Edwin Lara began to spiral. After fleeing his home, he drove to Salem, Oregon, where he spotted 19-year-old Andrea Elizabeth Mays sitting alone in her car in a Ross Dress for Less parking lot. With his gun pointed directly at her, Edwin forced Andrea to drive him to California. During the journey, he handcuffed her, forced her to take sleeping pills, and made unwanted advances. He showed her news reports about Kaylee's disappearance and confessed to killing her. When Andrea's car broke down in Wairika, California, Edwin's crime spree escalated further. He shot a 73-year-old man named Jack Levy in the abdomen while attempting to steal his car. Levy would survive, but Edwin wasn't done. At a nearby gas station, Edwin carjacked a vehicle with a grandmother and her 2 teenage grandsons inside. During the drive, he chillingly told them, quote, "I have an urge to kill," and confessed to murdering Kaylee and shooting a man in Wairika. After releasing the family on the side of the road, Edwin continued driving with Andrea. He forced her to record a video of him confessing to his crimes and post it to Facebook.
Hi everybody, I just want to say that I apologize for everything I've done. Most likely I'm going to get caught. And sorry about that girl in Central Oregon. And I just want to let family members, Andrea, that she's fine and she will be fine because so far she's been doing what I've been telling her to do. You know, and if you guys are wondering if I have done dirty things to her, no. Alright, I'm not that kind of guy. You know, I used to kill that other girl, you know, and I regret it. I regret killing her. You know, she's kept screaming and I had to silence her forever.
On July 26th, Edwin called 911 on himself while driving near Redding, California. He told the operator who he was, that he was wanted for murder, and explained that he had a gun and was wearing a bulletproof vest. Police caught up with him, pulled him over, and arrested him.
Going down to 57, he's hitting his brakes here.
Right southbound at Sourgrass.
Running 52, yielding at Sourgrass. Number 2, kind of yielding, 35.
We're kind of yielding 35 miles an hour at Sourgrass.
Running 52, stop, Sourgrass. I'm going to initiate the felony stop here.
Felony stop in progress southbound at Sourgrass.
Get your hands up! Get him up! Step out of the vehicle! You got me? Step out of the vehicle! Turn around! Turn around! Keep turning around! Walk back! Step over to your right! Step over to your right! Away from traffic. Drop down to your knees. Don't move.
During his interrogation, Edwin confessed to Kaylee's murder and drew a map showing where her body could be found. Police located Kaylee's remains on the side of Highway 126 near Milepost 100 in the Dry Creek area of Redmond, Oregon. The autopsy revealed that Kaylee had died from blunt force trauma, with evidence of strangulation, multiple skull fractures, and other injuries prior to her death. As investigators pieced together what happened that fateful night, a horrifying picture emerged. After her argument with her boyfriend, Kaylee had been walking alone near the college campus when she encountered Edwin Lara in his campus security vehicle. The exact circumstances of how Kaylee ended up in Lara's patrol car remain unclear, but what is known is that once inside, she was trapped. The vehicle had an enclosed rear cage with child locks and a partition between the front and back seats, features designed to make the security vehicle resemble a police car. Edwin drove Kaylee to a remote parking lot on campus known as B12, where he brutally assaulted and murdered her. He later confessed that when Kaylee began screaming, he, quote, had to silence her forever. In his confession, Edwin made a chilling statement about his motives.
So I think all through my life, I've struggled with somehow the urge to kill. But what has helped me not develop that, in a sense, is when I married my wife.
The parallels between Kaylee's murder and Edwin's school project on the railroad killer were unmistakable. Just as he'd studied, Edwin used a rock, weapon of opportunity, to kill Kaylee with blunt force trauma. The legal proceedings against Edward Lara were complex. His attorneys argued that his 6-hour interrogation and confession should be thrown out, claiming his rights had been violated. The judge ultimately ruled that the confession couldn't be used in the trial. However, prosecutors still had compelling evidence, including notes Edwin left in his car. One note read,
"The place I killed her is on the B12 lot. Run her over on College Way."
Another stated,
"This note is to say I'm sorry for taking her life. She screamed, and I had to silence her. My intention was not forever."
In January 2018, Edwin Lara pleaded guilty to aggravated murder and robbery. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, avoiding the death penalty that prosecutors had initially sought. At the sentencing hearing, Kaylee's mother, Julie Van Cleve, addressed Edwin directly. "You've failed to silence her. I'll always be the mother of a murder victim, but your mother will always be the mother of a murderer and a rapist." Andrea Mays, who survived her kidnapping ordeal, also spoke. "You thought you stole my life from me, but I'm not a victim. I'm a survivor, a warrior. I'm stronger than I've ever been, and you're gonna rot right where you belong." In April 2019, Edwin received a second life sentence for kidnapping and carjacking, ensuring he would never walk free again. The murder of Kaylee Sawyer exposed serious flaws in how campus security operated. Her family filed a lawsuit against Central Oregon Community College, arguing that the college had failed to conduct adequate background checks on Edwin Lara and had allowed campus security vehicles to closely resemble police patrol cars. The lawsuit revealed disturbing information. Other employees were aware of Edwin's fascination with dead bodies. He'd shown sexually explicit photos to coworkers, and one female employee had refused to ride in a car with him because of his behavior. In July 2020, the college settled with Kaylee's family for $2 million. But perhaps more importantly, Kaylee's death led to significant legislative change. In May 2019, Oregon Governor Kate Brown signed Bill 576, known as Kaylee's Law. The law curtails the policing authority of campus security officers and establishes clear distinctions between campus security and actual law enforcement. Under Kaylee's law, campus security vehicles, uniforms, and equipment cannot resemble those of law enforcement. Vehicles can't have rooftop lights or push bumpers, and they can't have dividers between the front and back seats. They must be equipped with GPS and interior video cameras or recording dispatch systems. When signing the law, Governor Brown stated, "Kaylee Sawyer's death was a tragedy, and we want to make sure that this never happens to a promising young Oregonian again." Kaylee's murder exposed a devastating truth. Sometimes danger wears the uniform of safety. In the wake of her death, Bend was forced to confront the reality that evil can lurk in the most unexpected places, even in a community known for its warmth and trust. Kaylee's law now stands as both a memorial and a safeguard. The legislation draws clear lines between campus security and law enforcement, potentially saving countless lives through its restrictions on vehicles, uniforms, and equipment. What began as one family's quest for justice has become a blueprint for campus safety reform nationwide. Edwin Lara serves his dual life sentence in silence, his urge to kill contained behind prison walls. Yet questions linger about what truly drove him to such brutality. His fascination with serial killers, his meticulous planning, and his calm demeanor during his crime spree suggest a predator who might have continued had circumstances not intervened. Today, the Deschutes River still flows through Bend. Tourists still flock to the breweries, and students still attend Central Oregon Community College. But beneath this unchanged exterior, something fundamental has shifted. When night falls and the campus grows quiet, few can forget what happened in parking lot B12. And perhaps most unsettling of all is the knowledge that had Edwin Lara not confessed to his wife, had he not embarked on his interstate crime spree, Kaylee might have become just another missing person, her case growing cold as her killer continued to patrol the very campus where she died. The Molalla Forest, a vast wilderness area spanning over 60,000 acres in the Cascade Mountains of Oregon. It's known for its rugged terrain, picturesque landscapes, and an array of abundant wildlife. But in the 1980s, it became infamous for something far more evil. It was the hunting ground of Dayton Leroy Rogers, a prolific serial killer who terrorized the area for years, leaving a trail of death, destruction, and paralyzing fear. This is Northern Crimes.
The material we're going to discuss this morning is very disturbing, and we will have some pictures that are considered graphic. Do you remember Dayton Leroy Rogers?
Who can forget him?
He was considered Oregon's worst serial killer. He brutalized, he tortured, he abused women for about 15 years until he finally, his bloodlust just took over and he started killing prostitutes. He started killing women, and it wasn't until the 8th woman was killed that he was actually apprehended.
Dayton Rogers is one of the most notorious serial killers in the history of Oregon. Between the years of 1983 to 1987, he murdered at least 7 women, mostly street workers and drug addicts, in a brutal and sadistic manner. Rogers had a chilling routine. He'd scour the streets for prostitutes, lure them into his car, then drive them to a desolate area. There he would bind them tightly, silencing their cries, before ruthlessly assaulting and killing them. His sinister pattern repeated again and again, with each victim meeting a gruesome fate. He was known as the Molalla Forest Killer, and his reign of terror left the shocked state of Oregon reeling. But who was Dayton Leroy Rogers, and what led him to commit such heinous crimes? Dayton Leroy Rogers was born in Moscow, Idaho, in 1953. He grew up in a working-class family and, by all accounts, had a relatively normal childhood. However, there were signs that all was not well. He was a loner, often withdrawn and moody. He had a tendency to get in trouble with the law, and he displayed deviant behavior that worried his family. In 7th grade, he was arrested for shooting a BB gun at passing cars. As Dayton grew older, his behavior became more erratic. He dropped out of school, and he drifted from job to job. He had a string of failed relationships, and he began to spend more and more time in the Molalla Forest. For Dayton, the forest was a place of refuge, a place where he could escape from the pressures of society, but it was also a place where he could indulge his darkest fantasies. In 1972, at the age of 18, Rogers committed his first known attack. Hoping for a romantic encounter with his girlfriend, he drove her to a secluded area just outside Eugene, Oregon. There, he assaulted her and, out of nowhere, stabbed her in the abdomen. After taking her to the hospital, he was arrested and sentenced to 4 years probation. But his behaviors only escalated. The following year, Rogers assaulted 2 teenage girls in the Lane County area, attacking them with a glass bottle. For this, he was institutionalized at the Oregon State Mental Hospital. After his release in 1974, Rogers met and married a woman named Sherry Miller, and after 7 months of dating, they got married. But marriage couldn't curb his inner demons, and in December 1975, Rogers was arrested and indicted, this time on suspicion of rape. But in a twist of fate, the jury found him not guilty. Then, in 1977, he was again charged with rape, this time pleading innocent by reason of insanity. Dayton was convicted, but only received a 5-year jail sentence. In his closing remarks, the state prosecutor was quoted as saying,
"Dayton Leroy Rogers is a murder waiting to happen."
It's difficult to understand how a monster like Dayton Leroy Rogers could slip through the cracks again and again. Perhaps it was simple chance, but oddly enough, his curious luck is similar to another serial killer from Alaska, Robert Hansen, who was let out of prison again and again, only to murder 17 women in the wilderness of Alaska. Whatever the case, Dayton Rogers was released from prison in 1982. In hindsight, this would be a calculation with terrible consequences. On August 7th, 1987, at around 3 o'clock in the morning, patrons at a Denny's restaurant in Clackamas County heard the terrified screams of a woman. One of the witnesses ran toward the source of the wailing, but as he got closer, the cries stopped. It was then that he observed a man, bloody knife in hand, standing between the woman's legs. When the witness yelled at the man, he took off running, got into a pickup truck, and fled the scene. The witness called the police, then began attending to the injured woman, who was naked, bleeding heavily, with labored breathing. Within minutes, paramedics arrived and transported the woman to the hospital. Meanwhile, another patron from the restaurant had followed the knife-wielding attacker to his home, writing down his license plate. Back at the hospital, the woman, who had been identified as 25-year-old Jennifer Smith, tragically died from her severe wounds. Shortly thereafter, police arrived at the door of the attacker and arrested him. His name was Dayton Leroy Rogers. Over the next few weeks, police conducted an investigation of the murder of Jennifer Smith. The night of the murder, they had recovered the murder weapon, which Rogers had thrown to the ground during his escape. In subsequent searches of his house and the shop where he worked, police uncovered a trove of evidence, including a hacksaw, boots with blood on them, burned women's clothing, miniature vodka bottles, as well as multiple bloodstains in his house, the workshop, and his vehicle. Police wondered what all this evidence could mean. it would take them just a few short weeks to find out. On August 31st, 1987, a bow hunter walking through the Molalla Forest discovered a woman's body beneath some matted ferns. He immediately called police and later took them to the corpse. Over the course of the following week, the bodies of 6 more women were found in the same general area. All the bodies were naked and in various stages of decomposition. During autopsies, the medical examiner estimated that the bodies had been in the forest for 1 to 3 months. The women were identified as follows: Retha Marie Giles, age 16, Lisa Marie Mock, age 23, Nandus Noni K. Cervantes, age 26, Cynthia Dee Diane DeVore, age 24, Christine Lotus Adams, age 35, and Maureen Ann Hodge, age 26. A 7th victim could not be identified. The injuries were horrific, with commonalities between the victims being strangulation, stab wounds in the back, and feet cut off above the ankles. Other evidence at the dump site included orange juice in vodka bottles, a knife with human tissue on it, as well as several items that had been tied into knots, including pantyhose, shoelaces, rope, and cloth. It didn't take police long to realize that Dayton Rogers was most likely the killer. In February 1988, while the state's investigation of the Molalla Forest killings continued, Rogers was indicted, tried, and convicted for aggravated murder for causing the death of Jennifer Smith. He was sentenced to life in prison. During the guilt phase of that trial, the court refused to permit the introduction of evidence regarding the Molalla Forest victims, but investigators hoped that they could deal with that later. Shortly thereafter, Rogers was indicted for the killings of the 6 identified Molalla Forest victims. He was charged with 2 counts of aggravated murder for each of the victims, and this time, the state would seek the death penalty. During the second trial, which began in March 1989, the state presented evidence that the 6 Molalla Forest victims were prostitutes. So they offered the testimony of 11 other prostitutes who had, quote, dated Rogers. The witnesses testified about Rogers' conduct during their encounters with him, and it was devastating. They talked about his habit of mixing vodka from miniature bottles into small plastic orange juice containers. Several of the witnesses testified that Rogers took them to areas in or near the Molalla Forest. They also testified about his violent sexual proclivities, including tying their hands and feet tightly behind them, threatening to cut their breasts and feet with a knife, and deceiving them about his intentions concerning their, quote, dates. Eventually, the jury convicted Rogers on all counts of the 6 indictments. On Wednesday, June 7, 1989, the jury unanimously decided that Rogers had intentionally killed his victims without provocation, and that he would continue to pose a threat to society. The judge sentenced him to death by lethal injection. In the United States, the death penalty is a contentious topic. It's not uncommon for criminals that are sentenced to death to eventually have those sentences overturned, and that's exactly what happened to Dayton Leroy Rogers. In 2000, the Oregon Supreme Court upheld his convictions, but his sentence of death was overturned. Since that time, Rogers has come before the court many times, each time the state hoping to reinstate the death penalty, and each time failing. Ultimately, Rogers received a 4th death sentence, but again, the wheels of justice spun too slow. Recently, Governor Kate Brown signed a new law limiting aggravating factors needed for the death penalty, leading to the overturning of Rogers' death sentence on November 12, 2021. Governor Brown later commuted all death sentences in Oregon to life without parole on December 13, 2022. As recently as 2022, families of the victims continue to seek justice for their loved ones, but as of yet, Dayton Leroy Rogers continues to serve out his life sentence at Two Rivers Correctional Institution in Umatilla. Rogers has never spoken with authorities about the murders, and he continues to hold the secrets of what he knows deep within himself. It's hard to come to terms with the savagery of serial killers like Dayton Leroy Rogers. Maybe we'll never understand his motives. But what we can do is honor the innocent human beings that lost their lives. July 4th, 1982, Salem, Oregon. You're 18 years old, fresh out of high school, and the last thing you want to do on Independence Day is deliver pizza. But the phone keeps ringing at Domino's, and besides, you need the money. Your red, white, and blue uniform feels patriotic enough for the holiday as you grab the keys to the delivery van. The address seems straightforward. River Haven Drive South, near Brown Island Road. You've delivered to that area before. Remote, sure, but nothing unusual for Salem's outskirts. The customer sounded normal on the phone. 3 large pizzas, cash payment. You drive through the fading daylight, past the familiar neighborhoods, toward the wooded area where the city gives way to farmland. The van's headlights cut through the growing darkness as you search for house numbers. But something's wrong. The address doesn't exist. You drive up and down the road twice, checking your delivery slip. The house numbers skip right over the one you're looking for. You park the van and step out, pizza boxes in hand, wondering if you've made a mistake. That's when you realize you're not alone in the darkness, and the person who called in this order, they were never planning to pay for pizza. Today, we explore the unsolved mysteries that have haunted Oregon for decades. Cases where ordinary moments turned deadly, where families vanished without explanation, and where the beautiful Pacific Northwest landscape conceals secrets that refuse to stay buried. This is Northern Crimes. On July 4th, 1982, as America celebrated Independence Day, 18-year-old Sherry Irely was called into work at Domino's Pizza in Salem, Oregon. She just graduated from Sprague High School and was living with her cousin in an apartment in South Salem, working part-time as a pizza delivery driver to earn money for her future. What should have been a routine delivery on a holiday evening would instead become one of Oregon's most haunting unsolved mysteries. Sherry was born on December 6, 1963, a young woman with brown hair, blue eyes, and a petite 5'2" frame weighing just 100 pounds. She had distinctive scars, a 1-inch mark on her right eyebrow, another under her chin, and an 8-inch surgical scar on her lower spine. Between her left thumb and forefinger, she bore the tattooed initials, TB, a permanent reminder of a past relationship. That evening, Sherry left work at 9:30 p.m. to deliver a pizza to an address on River Haven Drive South near Brown Island Road in a remote area of Salem. She was driving the company's delivery van and wearing her red, white, and blue Domino's Pizza shirt with blue jeans, the uniform that would make her easily identifiable to customers. When Sherry failed to return, concern quickly mounted. Later that evening, her abandoned pizza delivery van was discovered with the parking brake set and the door standing open. 3 large pizza boxes lay scattered on the ground nearby, along with Sherry's hat. Despite the obvious signs of a struggle, there was no trace of Sherry herself. The investigation revealed disturbing details about the delivery call. Police determined that the address on River Haven Drive was fictitious. It simply didn't exist. The person who'd called in the order had also provided a false name, and investigators traced the call to a hotel in Salem. Someone had deliberately lured Sherry to that remote location with the intention of harming her. Adding to the mystery, the day after Sherry's disappearance, someone called the Domino's Pizza where she worked, demanding a ransom for her safe return. The caller never contacted them again, and no one attempted to collect any money, leaving investigators to wonder if this was a genuine kidnapping attempt or something more sinister. For years, suspicion focused on Daryl J. Wilson, who drove a lime green pickup truck similar to a vehicle seen near the site of Sherry's disappearance. Wilson had initially denied knowing Sherry, but later admitted to being acquainted with her. Strangely, he had painted his truck brown just 8 days after Sherry went missing. When questioned by police about taking a polygraph test, Wilson refused, but said he would speak to a psychic. The case took a dramatic turn when Wilson committed suicide, just hours after being questioned by investigators, fueling speculation that he was responsible for Sherry's disappearance. However, later events would prove this theory wrong. In December 2007, 25 years after Sherry disappeared, authorities announced a breakthrough. William Scott Smith, already serving 2 life terms for the murders of 2 Salem women, pleaded guilty to Sherry's murder. Smith revealed that he and an accomplice, Richard Nassif, had planned to kidnap another female Domino's driver for ransom, but when she wasn't working that night, they took Sherry instead. According to Smith's confession, it was Nassif who made the ransom call to Domino's. Smith claimed he strangled Sherry to death and dumped her body in the Pudding River, the same location where he'd disposed of his other victims. Nassif had died of cancer in 2003 and was never charged. Despite extensive searches of the Pudding River area, Sherry's body has never been recovered. The river has flooded many times since 1982, and any evidence may have washed away long ago. Sherry Irely's case demonstrates the dangers faced by those in service jobs and the evil that can lurk behind seemingly routine customer calls. Though her killer has been identified and punished, Sherry's family continues to hope that someday her remains might be found, finally bringing her home after more than 4 decades. On December 7th, 1958, the Martin family of Portland, Oregon, set out on what should have been a simple Sunday drive to collect Christmas greenery in the Columbia River Gorge. Kenneth Martin, 54, his wife Barbara, 48, and their 3 daughters, 14-year-old Barbara Barbie, 13-year-old Virginia, and 11-year-old Suzanne, left their northeast Portland home around 1 p.m. in their cream and red 1954 Ford Country Squire station wagon. They would never return home, vanishing into one of the Pacific Northwest's most enduring mysteries. the Martin family was well established in Portland's community. Kenneth worked as an electrician, while Barbara managed their household on Northeast 56th Avenue in the Roseway neighborhood. Their eldest child, 28-year-old Donald, was serving in the U.S. Navy and stationed in New York at the time, making him the only family member to survive what investigators would later suspect was a carefully orchestrated crime. The family's final day began with plans to gather holly, pine boughs, and other greenery for Christmas decorations, a common holiday tradition in the evergreen-rich Columbia River Gorge. Their route took them east along the scenic highway that winds through the dramatic canyon carved by the Columbia River between Oregon and Washington. The last confirmed sighting of the family came around 4 p.m. when they stopped for gasoline at Dean Baxter's service station in Cascade Locks, about 40 miles from Portland. Baxter later recalled that the family seemed in good spirits and continued to head east after their stop. A waitress at the Paradise Snack Bar in Hood River, approximately 20 miles further east, reported serving the family a late lunch, describing them as appearing normal and happy. As evening approached, other motorists reported seeing the Martin family at dusk on the north bank of the Columbia River in Washington state. This would be the last confirmed sighting of any family member alive. When the Martins failed to return home, friends and family weren't initially alarmed. Sunday drives sometimes extended longer than planned. But when Kenneth didn't report to work at Echo Electric Home Service Company on December 9th, and the children were absent from their schools, concern mounted rapidly. That evening, Kenneth's boss, Taylor Eckel, officially reported the family missing. The investigation that followed would become one of the largest manhunts in Oregon history, involving multiple law enforcement agencies and hundreds of volunteers. The family's home showed no signs of struggle. Laundry sat in the washing machine, dishes remained on the drying rack, and substantial money was left untouched in their bank accounts. The first major breakthrough came in February 1959 when volunteer searchers discovered tire tracks leading off a cliff near the Dalles, about 20 miles east of Hood River. The tracks appeared to match the Martin family's Ford wagon, and paint chips found on rocks at the scene were consistent with their vehicle's cream and red color scheme. FBI analysis confirmed the paint matched the make and model of the Martin car. Detective Walter Graven of the Multnomah County Sheriff's Office became convinced this wasn't an accident. His investigation revealed that the tire tracks showed no return marks, suggesting the vehicle had been deliberately pushed over the cliff. The timing also troubled investigators. If the family had been seen at dusk on the Washington side of the river, how had their car ended up on the Oregon side after dark? In May 1959, 5 months after the disappearance, the Columbia River yielded its tragic secrets. The bodies of 11-year-old Susan and 13-year-old Virginia were discovered floating downstream, identified through dental records. Both had died from drowning, but the discovery of their remains only deepened the mystery surrounding the fate of Kenneth, Barbara, and Barbie. Detective Graven's investigation focused on 2 ex-convicts, Roy Light and an unnamed accomplice who'd been in the area when the Martins disappeared. A cafe owner reported that both men were present when the Martin family stopped for their final meal and left at approximately the same time. Adding to the intrigue, a stolen gun covered in dried blood was found near Cascade Locks, later traced to merchandise that Donald Martin had been accused of stealing from Meyer and Frank department store years earlier. The case remained cold for decades until November 2024, when amateur diver Archer Mayo discovered what appeared to be the Martin family's station wagon submerged in 50 feet of water near Cascade Locks. The vehicle was found upside down, buried nose first, under sediment and rock in an area known as the Pit. In March 2025, recovery crews managed to extract portions of the vehicle, including the chassis and engine, which were sent to the Oregon State Crime Lab for analysis. While investigators believe the parts match the make, model, and color of the Martin vehicle, they can't definitively confirm it belonged to the family without recovering the vehicle identification number. After 67 years, the Martin family disappearance remains officially unsolved, but the recent discovery has renewed hope that this enduring mystery may finally be resolved. On July 26, 1971, 3 juveniles moving horses between properties in the Inglewood area near Coos Bay, Oregon, made a grim discovery that would remain a mystery for exactly 50 years. Floating face up in the waters of Snedden Creek was the badly decomposed body of a teenage boy, because he, quote,
almost looked like a frog in the creek.
According to Captain James Patterson of the Coos County Sheriff's Office, the unidentified victim was given the nickname Frog Boy, a name that would stick for half a century. The body belonged to a Caucasian male between 14 and 18 years old, standing approximately 5'4" to 5'6" tall and weighing around 145 pounds. He had long, light brown hair and was wearing a long-sleeved turtleneck sweater. His pants, blue jeans laced up the sides with leather straps down the legs, were found a short distance away. Due to severe decomposition, investigators couldn't determine a cause of death, though they estimated he died anywhere from 5 weeks to 5 months before the discovery. Despite extensive investigation and canvassing of the area, no one could identify the young man. With the technology available in 1971, Coos County eventually paid for his burial in a local cemetery, and the case went cold. The nickname Frog Boy was chosen deliberately. As Captain Patterson explained,
it was something that would stick in their heads. Maybe the next generation of law enforcement people who come through the office, maybe they'll remember that.
And they did remember. In 2017, using a grant from the Oregon State Medical Examiner's Office, the department arranged for the remains to be exhumed. Bone fragments were sent to Parabon Nanolabs for DNA analysis, creating a profile that included details about the victim's ancestry, eye color, skin tone, hair color, and facial features. A digital reconstruction showed what the deceased may have looked like in life. The breakthrough came when investigative genetic genealogist C.C. Moore began working the case in August 2021. After 3 months of painstaking research, she built family trees that led her to identify the victim as Winston Arthur Maxey III, and in doing so, she solved not just his mystery, but another one that had been unfolding simultaneously. Winston was born on October 4, 1954, in Rupert, Idaho. The second child and first son of Winston Arthur Maxey Jr. and Lorene Maxey. Described as a cute, shy boy with a big heart, he was known for his resourcefulness. When his parents couldn't afford to buy him a skateboard, he built one himself from scrap plywood. At 15, he began dating a girl who became pregnant in the fall of 1970. In spring 1971, after an argument with his mother, 16-year-old Winston was asked to leave the family home. With nowhere to go, he slept at a local campground until his cousin offered him shelter. When his pregnant girlfriend returned to Rupert for a visit in April 1971, she refused to speak with him, knowing he wanted her to keep the baby. Shortly after, Winston's older sister Vicky arranged for him to visit her in Boise. During his brief stay, he learned from a friend about booming logging and fishing industries on the Oregon coast. Vicky recalled that Winston told her he was going to Coos Bay to look for work. This was the last time anyone in the family saw him alive. The family never reported Winston missing. As his sister Martha explained, their parents had grown tired of his rebellious behavior and previous runaway attempts.
He went out on his own. That was what he chose to do. There's nothing we can do.
Meanwhile, a baby girl named Lori Merriam had been adopted at just 2 weeks old in June 1971. Throughout her life, she searched for her biological father, eventually creating a Facebook page called Where in the World is Winston Maxey, and submitting her DNA to ancestry websites. When C.C. Moore discovered Lori's Facebook page during her research, the pieces fell into place. DNA comparison confirmed that Frog Boy was indeed Winston Maxey, and Lori was the daughter he never knew existed. the identification was bittersweet for Lori.
He didn't even get to live his life, and here I am living mine. Man, it crushed me.
But it also brought closure after a 50-year search for her dad. Today, Winston's death remains officially undetermined, but the Coos County Sheriff's Office considers it an active case. Lori believes her father was murdered and has changed the Facebook page to "Who in the World Murdered Winston Maxey?" She's also established the Winston Arthur Maxey III Foundation to help other families with missing loved ones. After 50 years, Frog Boy finally has his name back, but the mystery of what happened to Winston Maxey in the summer of 1971 continues. On August 2nd, 1993, 22-year-old Katie Eggleston kissed her family goodbye and headed to work at AllNet Communication Services in Lake Oswego, Oregon. It was her first day working alone as a telecommunications salesperson, a milestone she'd been eagerly anticipating. By evening, she'd vanished into thin air, launching one of Portland's most haunting unsolved cases and leaving behind a mystery that continues to baffle investigators more than 3 decades later. Katie was born on May 4th, 1971 in Redmond, Oregon, to parents Paul and Heather Eggleston. Her father, a former Seattle high school teacher, had become superintendent of the Redmond School District. Her mother worked as an elementary school teacher. Katie was one of 4 daughters in a close-knit family that valued education, independence, and hard work. After graduating from North Eugene High School in 1989, Katie enrolled at Oregon State University in Corvallis. There, she joined the Alpha Chi Omega sorority and earned a Bachelor of Arts degree in English in the spring of 1993. Following graduation, she moved to Gresham to live temporarily with her older sister Janet while launching her career. Her new job at AllNet represented a fresh start and a step towards independence. The company specialized in long-distance communication services, and Katie was hired as a field salesperson, meeting with clients around the Portland area. August 2nd marked her first day making sales calls completely on her own. That morning, Katie attended a company meeting before setting out. She made several scheduled stops at Northeast Whitaker Way, visited a bank, fueled up at a gas station, and had lunch at Burger King near Lloyd Center. Her final appointment was at the Port of Portland building at 700 Northeast Multnomah Street, just a few blocks away. Inside the building, several witnesses saw Katie making phone calls in the lobby. 5 different people later recalled that she appeared, quote, worried and preoccupied, a striking contrast to her usual composed demeanor. At around 2:15 p.m., the man she was supposed to meet saw her exit an elevator with an unfamiliar man. He was described as having a dark complexion, dark hair, and wearing a blue blazer. That was the last confirmed sighting of Katie Eggleston. When she failed to return to the AllNet office for a scheduled 5 p.m. meeting with her supervisor, concern quickly mounted. Katie was known for her professionalism and reliability. Missing such an appointment was deeply out of character. Around 5 p.m., a witness spotted her gray Volkswagen Golf still parked outside the Port of Portland building, but by early the next morning, the car was gone. At 12:30 a.m. on August 3rd, a security guard discovered the vehicle abandoned in an industrial complex on Northeast Airport Way, roughly 9 miles from where Katie was last seen. The car raised troubling questions. It was unlocked with the window down and keys still in the ignition. Katie's purse and workout clothes were inside, but her AllNet sales binder and passport were missing. Most unsettling was the lack of any clear signs of a struggle, suggesting she may have left the vehicle willingly or under pressure. The investigation was plagued by early missteps. Portland police initially theorized that Katie had gone into hiding to avoid testifying in her sister Janet's federal tax evasion case, but that theory quickly collapsed. Janet had already pleaded guilty, and Katie was never required to testify. The case gained renewed attention in 2004 when serial killer Joel Patrick Courtney was arrested for the murder of Brooke Wilberger in Corvallis. Courtney had been in Portland at the time of Katie's disappearance, and both women were strikingly similar. Young, blonde, blue-eyed Oregon State students. But despite speculation, no DNA or physical evidence ever connected him to Katie's case. In 2006, the FBI quietly informed Katie's father that Courtney had been cleared in 2 unnamed disappearances, but emphasized that Katie's case remained active and under investigation. Over the years, her family pursued every available lead, hiring private investigators, distributing flyers, and offering rewards, yet no credible tips ever emerged. Katie's parents, Paul and Heather, passed away without answers. Heather in 2011 and Paul in 2017. Both went to their graves believing their daughter had been murdered. Today, the disappearance of Katie Eggleston remains one of the most mysterious and unsettling cases in Portland history. A bright, motivated young woman, eager to begin her adult life, simply vanished in broad daylight, leaving behind a trail of questions and a family still waiting for the truth. In February 2016, residents of Forest Grove, Oregon began reporting a strange, otherworldly noise that would captivate the nation and spawn countless theories about its origin. What started as a local nuisance quickly evolved into an internet phenomenon, drawing comparisons to everything from alien contacts to secret government experiments. This is the story of the Forest Grove Sound, a mystery that appeared as suddenly as it disappeared. Forest Grove is a quiet college town of about 25,000 people, located 25 miles west of Portland in Oregon's Tualatin Valley. Home to Pacific University, it's the kind of place where the most exciting news typically involves high school sports or campus events. But in February 2016, this peaceful community found itself thrust into the international spotlight by a sound unlike anything residents had ever heard. The first report came from Paula Lynch, who lived near Gales Creek Road on the west side of town. She described it as sounding like a, quote,
giant flute being played slightly off pitch, or steam brakes whistling in the distance.
Others compared it to a one-note violin or the highest string on a guitar played at full volume. Everyone agreed on one thing. It was, in the words of the local fire marshal,
a horrendous noise.
Lynch captured a recording of the sound on her phone and posted it to Facebook, where it quickly went viral. The 30-second clip revealed a piercing, sustained tone that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere all at once. Multiple people heard it on different days and at varying times, primarily concentrated on the west side of town near Gales Creek Road, which runs toward the coastal foothills. As word spread, Forest Grove became a magnet for theories. The police department's blog, typically filled with routine reports, suddenly became a lightning rod for speculation. Some callers suggested broken water mains, underground construction, or malfunctioning septic systems. Others pointed to more bizarre possibilities. Amish settlers using Apple devices, biblical prophecy, or even alien interference. The most far-fetched theories circulated quickly. Even late-night television got involved. Jimmy Fallon joked the noise must have come from Donald Trump. The police received voicemails quoting scripture and hundreds of emails offering increasingly wild explanations. One resident insisted the sound came from a government research facility in Alaska. Another suggested it was an attempt to drive residents out of town and take over the area. Seeking answers, Dr. Andrew Dawes, a physics professor at Pacific University, attempted to approach the mystery with scientific rigor. He created a crowdsourced map, allowing residents to report where and when they heard the sound, hoping to triangulate its origin. But even with numerous entries, the data failed to identify a precise location. A breakthrough came just weeks later when Langston Holland, an audio engineer in Florida, analyzed the viral recording and compared it to known industrial noises. His frequency analysis revealed a striking match: the signature tone of a failing HVAC compressor valve. In a February 22nd email to Dr. Dawes, Holland explained that the sound's characteristics, its harmonic resonance, slow onset, and eventual disappearance, aligned perfectly with a malfunctioning industrial air conditioning system. According to Holland, the worn valve would eventually stop sealing properly, then degrade to the point where it no longer made noise at all. The poorly sealing valve is going to wear to the point where it'll stop making noise anyway, he wrote. That's exactly what happened. By the end of February 2016, the mysterious sound was gone. Despite Holland's credible analysis, his HVAC theory never gained widespread traction. The media had moved on, and many locals preferred to keep the mystery alive. As Dr. Dawes later observed,
"Maybe once people know an answer, they don't want to ruin it for anyone else."
the Forest Grove sound became a textbook example of how modern media, online speculation, and community folklore can transform a technical glitch into something resembling a supernatural event. In an era of instant communication and viral sharing, even the hum of a failing machine can spark global fascination, at least for a while. Today, Forest Grove has returned to its quiet rhythms, but the legend of the sound lingers in forums and YouTube videos. For some, it remains an unsolved mystery. For others, it's proof that sometimes the truth just isn't as fun as the unknown. On November 2nd, 2021, 47-year-old Shane Spranger left his job site near Mackenzie Bridge, Oregon, and drove home to Vida for what should have been a brief break. He'd been working as a carpenter, rebuilding homes in an area devastated by the Holiday Farm fire, the same fire that had claimed his own house the year before. Shane was living in a fifth-wheel trailer, determined to reconstruct not just his property, but his entire life. He never made it back to work that afternoon, vanishing without a trace, and launching a mystery that would expose familiar patterns in Oregon's justice system. The Holiday Farm fire, one of the most destructive wildfires in Oregon history, erupted in September 2020. It scorched over 173,000 acres, destroyed more than 1,300 homes, and forced thousands to evacuate. Shane, like many fire survivors, was living temporarily in an RV while working to rebuild, embodying the resilience that defines many rural Oregon communities. His sister Stacy described him as a dedicated, reliable man who would never walk away from a job site without explanation. When Shane failed to return or contact anyone, his family immediately knew something was wrong. They reported him missing, but the initial response was all too familiar. Another missing person in a region where people seem to vanish with alarming frequency. The breakthrough came on June 27, 2023, when Shane's partial remains were discovered off Quartz Creek Road, about 5 miles southwest of the Blue River Reservoir. The location was significant, less than a mile from where his abandoned truck had been found nearly 2 years earlier. The discovery confirmed the family's worst fears, that Shane had met with foul play. But his case would soon connect to a broader story. In September 2023, human skull fragments were discovered in the same general region, setting off a second investigation, one that would reveal shocking lapses in evidence handling. The skull had reportedly been sitting in an Oregon State Police lab since October 1st, 2023, untested, unprioritized, and nearly forgotten. This is where a man named Parrish Bryson enters the story. The father of Michael Bryson, who disappeared after attending a rave near Dorena in August 2020. Parrish had become an unlikely advocate for missing persons families across Oregon. Through the Michael Bryson Foundation, he connected with others like the Sprangers, forming a network of families whose loved ones had vanished in Lane County's remote wilderness. What Parrish uncovered was a pattern of institutional neglect. The skull fragments could belong to any of several local missing persons, his own son Michael, Shane Springer, or others. Yet the evidence had sat untested for 20 months. Families were told if they wanted to expedite DNA testing, they'd need to pay $3,500 out of pocket. So they raised the money, but after growing media attention and public pressure, the state eventually agreed to cover the cost. The skull was sent to Bodie Technology in Virginia for forensic analysis. Results were expected within 8 to 10 weeks. Detective Tim Wallace of the Lane County Sheriff's Office acknowledged the reality.
Sometimes only 3 deputies patrol the entire 4,700 square mile county during a given shift. In a place where terrain is rugged and resources are stretched thin, even the most urgent cases can stall for months.
Parrish Bryson, whose own sister Dawn was murdered 22 years before Michael's disappearance, understands the family's pain firsthand.
Until someone is in this situation, it's almost impossible to understand.
His advocacy has helped create cold case units and shine a light on the dangers of eastern Lane County, where minimal law enforcement presence creates the perfect conditions for predators. The region, stretching from Vida to Blue River to Dorena, has quietly become what some investigators call a missing person hotspot. Dense forests and steep ravines offer cover, while the sparse population means crimes can go undetected for far too long. As families await DNA results that could finally bring answers, Shane Springer's case has become a symbol of both tragedy and hope. Tragedy for the lives lost and justice delayed, but hope that systemic change might prevent others from suffering the same fate. The skull fragments are more than just forensic evidence. They represent the voices of the missing, demanding to be heard after years of silence. From vanished families to phantom sounds, from bones in forgotten rivers to names lost for decades, Oregon's mysteries aren't confined to legend. They're found in files, in forests, in faces no one remembers. Some were solved after decades, and others may never be. But in a place where wilderness and silence still dominate, the unknown has room to grow, and sometimes it never lets go. Rain falls on Portland's streets, soft, steady, and unending. It's March 2023, and something is shifting in the shadows. The city, known for being progressive and creative, is also a place of deep struggle, where addiction, poverty, and displacement shape everyday life. And in that fragile space, something dark begins to stir. Over the next 3 months, 5 young women will vanish. Their bodies will later be found miles apart in culverts, barns, wooded trails, left in places meant to be forgotten. At first, their deaths are treated as isolated tragedies. No clear suspect, no apparent connections, just a string of misfortunates in a city too used to heartbreak. But beneath the surface, a gripping story begins to take form, one marked by silence, oversight, and a growing fear that a serial killer is on the loose. This is Northern Crimes. The first to vanish was Kristen Smith. 22 years old, with dreams bigger than her circumstances, Kristen was reported missing from Gresham on December 22, 2022. Her friends described her as compassionate but struggling, caught in the cycle of addiction that traps so many young people in Portland. For weeks, her family held on to hope. Flyers appeared on telephone poles, her photo circulated online, but as winter turned to spring, that hope began to fade. On February 19, 2023, hikers made a grim discovery in a wooded area off Southeast Deerdorf Road in Portland's Pleasant Valley neighborhood. The remains were decomposed, the terrain secluded. Eventually, the body was identified as Kristen Smith. She'd been dead for months. But her death wasn't an isolated tragedy. As spring arrived, more women disappeared. Joanna Speaks, 32, a mother of 3, was last seen near Clackamas Town Center. She vanished without explanation, leaving behind children who would never see their mother again. Charity Lynn Perry, 24, had been trying to rebuild her life. Despite battles with addiction, friends described her as fierce, resilient, someone determined to break the cycle. In early March, she too disappeared from the streets of Portland. Bridget Leanne Webster, 31, was last seen somewhere in the Portland metro area. Like the others, she lived on society's margins, vulnerable, often invisible. And then there was Ashley Reel. Just 22 years old, Ashley had recently filed a domestic violence complaint, a cry for protection that went unanswered. She was last seen in Portland in late March, and then, like the others, she vanished. These 5 women had different stories, but shared the same fate. They were young, vulnerable. They were trying to survive in a city that didn't always see them. And they were the kind of victims that society often overlooks, until, of course, it's too late. In April 2023, the discoveries began. On April 8th, the body of Joanna Speaks was found in an abandoned barn in Ridgefield, Washington, just 20 miles from Portland. The location was remote, the structure decaying. The medical examiner ruled her death a homicide, blunt force trauma to the head and neck. Whoever killed her had chosen a place few people ever go. 16 days later, on April 24th, searchers made a disturbing find near Ainsworth State Park in the Columbia River Gorge. The remains of Charity Lynn Perry were discovered in a culvert beneath Interstate 84, hidden out of sight in a location that required familiarity with the terrain. That same day, in Portland's Lentz neighborhood, police found another body, a woman inside a tent at a homeless encampment. Though foul play wasn't immediately suspected, the timing raised new questions about possible connections. The pattern continued. On April 30th, Bridget Leanne Webster was found in a rural part of Polk County south of Sheridan. Like the others, she'd been left in an isolated location, far from where she was last seen alive. The final discovery came on May 7th. A fisherman stumbled upon human remains in a wooded area near Eagle Creek in Clackamas County. The body was later identified as Ashley Reel. Each victim had been transported, removed from the city, and left in quiet, forgotten places. Barns, forests, ravines. Sites chosen not by chance, but by someone who understood the back roads and the blind spots. Despite the mounting similarities, Portland police maintained in early June that the deaths were unconnected. In a public statement, they wrote,
"At this time, we have no reason to believe these 6 cases are connected."
It was a position that would soon begin to unravel. To understand how these murders happened, we need to go back to 2020, the year Oregon burned. Wildfires raged across the state, consuming nearly 700,000 acres and pushing fire crews to their limits. Desperate for help, the state called on every available resource, including inmate firefighters from the Oregon Department of Corrections. Among them was a man named Jesse Lee Calhoun. At the time, Calhoun was serving a 50-month sentence for a string of felonies, including assaulting a police officer and injuring a canine during a violent arrest. His criminal record stretched back to 2004, a long list of theft, burglary, and weapons charges. In one 2018 arrest, he was found with methamphetamine, multiple firearms, and over 500 rounds of ammunition. He'd been labeled a, quote, prolific thief and career criminal by law enforcement, but now he was being given an opportunity to contribute. Fighting fires is grueling, dangerous work. Inmate crews face real risks for little reward. But there was one incentive that mattered, a chance at early release. On March 5th, 2021, Governor Kate Brown issued conditional commutations for 41 inmates who served on fire crews, including Calhoun. His sentence was shortened by nearly a year. He walked free on July 22, 2021. The commutations were part of a broader push for criminal justice reform. Governor Brown granted clemency to over 1,000 inmates during her time in office, cleared Oregon's death row, and pardoned tens of thousands of cannabis-related convictions. In many cases, these actions changed lives for the better, but in this case, they may have cost lives. Had Calhoun served his final sentence, he still wouldn't have been released by December 2022, just weeks before Kristen Smith disappeared. The commutations didn't create a killer, but it did give one a head start. After his release, Jesse Lee Calhoun was placed under post-prison supervision, required to obey all laws, avoid further arrests, and check in regularly with authorities. It was a system meant to catch early signs of relapse or danger, but in Calhoun's case, the warnings were loud and still ignored. In May 2022, just 10 months after his release, a man named Craig Wangrud filed a stalking complaint against Calhoun in Clackamas County. According to court records, Calhoun had been threatening Wangrud over his relationship with Calhoun's former partner. In one message, Calhoun allegedly wrote,
"I know everything about you, dude. Everywhere you go, what you do."
Another read,
"You're a fucking idiot that can't get over Krista. I'm here to say that won't be happening much longer."
The threats were direct and menacing, but the judge dismissed the petition the very next day. Calhoun remained free. Then, in November 2022, another red flag, this one far more urgent. Ashley Reel, just 22 years old, filed a domestic violence report with Portland police. She told officers that Calhoun had attacked and choked her, but no arrest was made. Later, Ashley's father would say,
"The police didn't do their work, and now my daughter is dead."
Both incidents, the threats and assault, were violations of Calhoun's supervision terms. Each one could have triggered his return to prison. Each one was a missed opportunity. The agency responsible for monitoring Calhoun, the Multnomah County Department of Community Justice, later acknowledged he'd violated his release conditions. But they refused to release details, citing an active investigation. By the time law enforcement began connecting the dots, it was already too late. The damage had been done, and the bodies were beginning to surface. While law enforcement hesitated, the families began to act. Official statements still claimed there were no connections, but the mothers didn't believe that. Melissa Smith, Diana Allen, other women who'd lost daughters. They started meeting in person, comparing notes, pushing for answers. They called themselves the Fighting Families. Bound by grief and a refusal to be ignored, they searched areas police had overlooked. They organized online, mapped locations, and refused to be silent. And slowly, something started to shift. By June 2023, investigators had begun to notice the same patterns the families had seen for months. Most of the women had frequented the same areas: Southeast 82nd Avenue, Clackamas Town Center. Their bodies had been dumped in rural or remote locations, often far from where they were last seen. The killings weren't random, they were organized, intentional, local. Behind the scenes, a multi-agency task force was quietly forming. The Portland Police Bureau, the Multnomah County Sheriff's Office, and other regional partners. They were building a case, and at the center of it was a name: Jesse Lee Calhoun. The break came through forensics. DNA evidence linked Calhoun to at least one of the women. Witness statements placed him with the others. His movements aligned with the disappearances, and his history, his knowledge of the landscape, his access, his prior violence made him impossible to ignore. On June 6th, law enforcement moved in. When officers approached Calhoun in Milwaukee to arrest him on a parole violation, he bolted, diving into the Willamette River in a desperate attempt to escape. It didn't work. That same day, prosecutors reached out to Governor Tina Kotek's office. They requested an emergency revocation of Calhoun's commutation. Kotek responded immediately. The commutation was voided. Calhoun was sent back to prison to serve the rest of his original sentence. The man, once released for fighting wildfires, was now being held in connection with something far more sinister, and the full scope of his crimes was just starting to come into focus. Jesse Lee Calhoun sat in prison, but the case against him was far from over. For nearly a year, detectives worked quietly, combing through witness statements, forensic reports, timelines, and old case files. The victims' families, meanwhile, waited, growing more frustrated with each passing month. But the delay wasn't negligence, it was strategy. Prosecutors knew they'd have only one shot to secure convictions. They needed a case strong enough to withstand scrutiny, to ensure Calhoun would never walk free again. In May 2024, that moment came. A Multnomah County grand jury indicted Jesse Lee Calhoun on multiple charges, 3 counts of second-degree murder, for the deaths of Charity Lynn Perry, Joanna Speaks, and Bridget Leanne Webster, 3 counts of abuse of a corpse. The indictment outlined a chilling timeline. Perry was killed on March 8, 2023, her body discovered 7 weeks later. Speaks was murdered 10 days later, her remains found in a derelict barn. Webster was killed on April 26th and recovered just 4 days later in rural Polk County. 3 murders in 6 weeks, each victim dumped in an isolated place, each killing more deliberate, each one closer than the last. Notably absent were charges in the deaths of Kristen Smith and Ashley Reel. Prosecutors said those investigations were ongoing, leaving open the possibility of additional indictments. At a press conference announcing the charges, Multnomah County District Attorney Mike Schmidt addressed the victims' families directly.
This community holds you in our hearts and is here to support you. We are committed to seeking justice in these tragic murders.
For the families, it was a long-awaited step forward, but there were still questions, still grief, and still the looming reality that some cases and some victims had yet to find closure. The indictment of Jesse Lee Calhoun marked a turning point, but it also raised painful questions. How had a man with a violent criminal history been released early from prison? Why weren't the red flags taken seriously when he threatened, stalked, and allegedly assaulted others? Could these women have been saved? The case quickly became a flashpoint in Oregon's criminal justice debate. Critics pointed to Governor Kate Brown's clemency program, arguing it had been too broad, that releasing Calhoun early had been a fatal mistake. Supporters countered that Calhoun would have been released anyway. The real failure, they said, was not the clemency itself, but what happened afterward, the lack of oversight, the missed opportunities to intervene. For the victim's family, the politics meant little. They had fought for over a year to have their daughters taken seriously, to prove there was a pattern, to push law enforcement past the assumption that these were just the tragic and unrelated outcomes of life on the margins. Diana Allen, the mother of Charity Perry, spoke at a press conference after the incident.
It's been very, very frustrating for us families not to have answers. I've also had to put back in my mind that these people cared more about justice for Charity than they did for my feelings.
What the case exposed was something larger than one man. It revealed how easily certain people, particularly women struggling with addiction, poverty, or homelessness, can slip through the cracks. How their deaths are more likely to be overlooked, their cases left unsolved, their stories forgotten. It was only through the persistence of their families, the mothers who refused to stop searching, that answers began to emerge. Calhoun may face a courtroom, but the reckoning has already begun in the system, the city, and the lives of those left behind. Today, Jesse Lee Calhoun remains behind bars, awaiting trial for a series of murders that shook Portland in early 2023. His case raises difficult questions about risk, oversight, and what happens when systems designed to rehabilitate fail to protect. For the families left behind, the fight continues. They've turned grief into action, refusing to let their daughters be forgotten, not as statistics, but as women with lives, with stories, with people who loved them. Portland, too, is left to reckon with what allowed this to happen, a city grappling with homelessness, addiction, and a fractured safety net, where those living on the margins are often unseen until it's too late. The rain still falls on Portland streets. It washes over sidewalks and back alleys, through neighborhoods touched by tragedy, but it doesn't wash away memory, and it doesn't erase what's been uncovered. Some secrets in the Pacific Northwest stay buried, but not these. These women were found, their stories told, and their families won't let their names fade. The Portland Killer's reign lasted just 3 months, but its impact will echo far longer. In the end, it wasn't the system that brought justice, it was the mothers who refused to stop searching. The investigation into Jesse Lee Calhoun is ongoing. If you have information related to these cases, contact the Portland Police Bureau or your local law enforcement agency.